Ready? Okay.
All right.
Good. Okay, welcome to the March 15th Select Board meeting. Before we get started, if you're able to, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thanks. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started with our meeting, we're going to open it up to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to speak to items that are on or not on our agenda. We ask that people please provide their name, address, and if they know their voting precinct. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Residents may raise new issues, identify community problems, or comment on past, present, or future board agendas. We encourage comments be made in an orderly manner, and we encourage civility when people make their remarks, though we can't restrict some comments. We request that people refrain from using disparaging remarks or criticisms towards individuals or groups or other committee members or especially town personnel. And if there are such matters that need to be addressed, you can reach out to either the town administrator or myself outside of public comment in our public meetings. And with that, I will open it up to public comment. If there's public comment in the room, if people have public comment on the teams, they can raise their hand, and they can also email me at nduffy, D-U-F-F-Y, @swampscottma.gov. So is there any public comment?
Procedural process form here.
Can you step to the mic? Sorry.
I just have a procedural comment. Is this the time for me to make comment on the new and old business? Or do I make my comments now or wait to the presentation?
Is your comment relevant to the public hearing for the Dockside Pub? Or?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, so sorry, I should have mentioned that. We're
Okay.
going to open that up to a public hearing, and at that point, we'll take your comment.
Very well. Okay. I'll wait to that time.
All right, thanks for the question.
Neil, can I just ask, but other things on new and old, I never know the answer to this. But for example, we're going to hear a presentation from the Traffic Study Committee. If there are people here that want to speak about that, but they haven't heard the presentation either, will they have a chance to speak after we hear the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I think not seeing any other public comment online or in person, I think we can move on. Is Jared here?
Jared is not here. He should be here any minute. He's en route.
Okay. Let's see if we can. I don't think we have a
Tree canopy? Let's go tree canopy.
Let's do it.
It's going to be too.
Well, what about the appointments?
It's okay. Let's do it.
Just the appointments.
No, let's do tree canopy.
Tree canopy? Tree canopy.
Well, we have
Tree canopy.
the public hearing.
It's okay.
I don't think we can get through that.
Okay. Let's move on to the tree canopy study, which is the tree committee is here to present a tree canopy study. I think we have Tara Gallagher.
Yep, thank you. So I'm Tara Gallagher. I'm a member of the Tree Committee in Swampscott, and we are thrilled that we were able to work with students from Salem State to look at tree canopy loss. I just want to provide one snippet of context for the study. We have been concerned about tree canopy loss. We wanted to see if we could quantify it. We were thinking of things like, the building of the high school, the current elementary school project. And initially, we were a teeny bit disappointed to learn that the study period would not contain either of those two projects. In fact, we were very very surprised by the results and how much tree canopy loss there was. So it's always good to have data. That's why, it's one of the reasons why we support additional funding for the DPW budget for trees and why we support the municipal reforestation bill, which Jim Olivetti could answer questions about afterwards if you have any. He's from the tree committee as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce Danny Schottfried and Becca Smalley from the Salem State University Master's Program in Geoinformation Science. Thank you very much to them.
Thanks, Tara.
Just waiting for the slides to come up. Thank you, Tara, for that introduction. Danny's going to be controlling the PowerPoint. Just go to the next slide. So since Tara already kind of went over the background, we did this project for a class last semester. I'm not going to go into super great detail about the background because Tara just went over it and I want to be conscious of time. But our main objective of the project is to use satellite imagery in ArcGIS Pro to observe and quantify the loss of trees over time in the town of Swampscott. We were able to use this by collecting imagery online from the National Agricultural Imagery Program. They collect data approximately every 2 years. Our analysis really only covers every other year starting in 2010 and going on until 2016. And we do have a reasoning because of that. After 2016, the National Agricultural Imagery Program used a new sensor, which caused the imagery to have different pixel sizes. So for one, we had to resample the images after 2016, which caused a little bit of differences in the images. But also after 2016, all of the data was collected in late October, which was in the fall. Obviously, the trees lose their leaves then, so that caused some issues with the results, therefore causing us not being able to use that data after 2016. I'm not going to go into super great detail with the methodology because, again, I want to be super conscious of time that we have here, but basically we did this project by creating a land cover classification. Danny, you could go to the next slide. And that's what that looks like. It just shows the different land cover types in Swampscott over time. Between our time frame. This includes tree cover, development, any areas that are roads or planted cultivated areas, grassland. So that's what the land cover looks like. From there, we did an accuracy assessment that shows us how accurate our results are for the land cover types, which overall was pretty good accuracy. It's pretty much 90% and above, which is really good. And with the land cover classifications, we were able to do a change detection analysis, which basically just shows us where any tree cover has changed over time to a different land cover type. So like Tara said, it could be developments. If an area was cleared out and now it's just grass, it would show on this map. And I know these maps are very hard to see, but at the end of this presentation, Danny's going to show a mapping tool that we use that we can actually zoom in and show you these specific areas. So can we actually skip to the Paradise Road one? You might have to click a few times. Yeah, so you play the one, you could do both actually. So this shows, the video clips show two different images. I know they're kind of both going at the same time. The first darker image is 2010. The second is 2016. So if you look at the Littles Point Road on the left side, you could see some tree loss right in the center right there where now it's just grass. On the right, there's a development that got put, so all the trees around that development with the white roof, you could see all of those trees that were lost over time. So with our project, we were able to really pinpoint these areas, which is awesome. You can go to the results at the end. We could skip these ones. So these are the results of our final change detection analysis. So I want you to focus on that acreage at the end for each of those years. This just shows the total acreage of tree cover over time. So as you can see, from 2010 to 2016, the town of Swampscott lost 110 acres of tree cover, which is quite significant for such a small town. You could go to the next slide. And for those of you that like percentages, this shows pretty much the same thing, but it's just showing the percent change from tree cover to any other land cover type, whether it be like planted cultivated area, roads, or a developed area. So from here, we're going to click onto our mapping tool. Just going to pull that up. And then I'm going to have Danny talk a little bit about this dashboard.
All right, so what I did here, I took the results from that change detection analysis that shows where the tree cover was lost, and I made it accessible online so people could look at it. And as you move the map around, once it loads, the numbers in the bottom will adjust and give you an accurate calculation of how much tree cover was lost in that specific map frame. So you can zoom in onto a specific address and try and you'll be able to see how many acres of trees were lost.
From 2010 to 2016?
Yes. So here, like, for example, this shows in this frame right here, it was about 1.3 acres of tree cover that was lost. And then you can also click on it, and it has the exact statistics for the shapes.
Is the red where we lost trees?
Yes.
And the green is just,
So the green is where it changed from tree cover to planted or cultivated, so grass or yards. But there was some issues with some of the shadows, so I thought it was important to keep that in there, but not include that in the calculation.
gotcha.
So right now, it's only calculating the loss of acreage from development and roads.
I know this probably sounds like a simple question, but what is happening as we lose more of that tree cover canopy? What happens to the town?
For a smaller town like Swampscott, the effects aren't going to be as drastic because you still, obviously compared to a city, there's a lot more tree cover. But over time, urban heat increases because it's no shadows, nothing holding those cool areas.
So as we deal with global warming and temperatures get hotter and hotter, probably not great that we're losing a significant amount of acreage of tree canopy, because that's going to keep Swampscott cooler.
Right.
So that's important.
There were a couple of big areas of notice that
This
we
is,
came across.
right next to the golf course. It was that assisted living.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, where were the other ones?
I mean, not only does this impact the urban cooling, but you gotta think, a lot of people that live at this assisted living place might wanna, walk outside and enjoy those trees. And now if you look at it, I mean, there's a whole lot of trees that, aren't there anymore, so they don't really have a nice, scenic place to walk through. So it could affect quality of life, especially for those folks who have to be at that assisted living facility. Is there other places you want to go?
I think we wanted to see the one on Paradise opposite the cemetery, right here.
Nope. Nope.
The Avery,
Essex Street. It's off of Essex Street.
sorry. Yeah, it's hard to,
Yeah, what's the
see
map?
that, and unfortunately, they don't live in Swampscott.
That's the one thing I wanted to put it in there, just a little bar.
See
you
the
can search
Swampscott
address.
Cemetery?
Go towards Swampscott Cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Zoom in there.
Yeah, okay.
This one.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Yes.
I'll just say one thing, that it was interesting to just see how the big areas where there was loss, but also how many parcels had loss, how it's all throughout.
Right. Is there any context for, like 100, I think it was 110 acres over that period? I mean, I just don't know what that means. Like, I think any tree loss, obviously you don't want to lose any trees. Maybe that's not obvious, but, but is that typical? Is that something that most urban or suburban neighborhoods might see just because of natural, development and projects and that sort of thing? Or does it seem like this is surprisingly more than we would see?
I think it's more than we are comfortable with. If you think of that being compounded year over year over year, decade over decade, it's an untenable situation. And a lot of it has to do with the age of our trees in town. Not the big projects, but the fact that there's been so much loss elsewhere in throughout town. These trees are, I think of a lot of our town, a lot of housing stock's about 100 years old. So there are a lot of trees that are quite old and big, beautiful trees that come down during storms. So a lot of loss is because of the age of the trees, and we're not replacing those trees at the same rate. So I don't think it's a normal situation. I think it's exacerbated by Swampscott's housing stock and patterns of trees. But then, of course, it is exacerbated also by larger development projects. So it's something we really need to be aware of. As a tree committee, we plan to educate people on the results of this study and really try to make people aware, because a lot of it was on private property. We, as a tree committee, were focused on public trees.
But other than like the large projects that you pointed out, there's no, it doesn't sound like there's any discernible like pattern, or like there's more tree loss in a certain area of town for particular reasons other than, I mean, it just looks like it's scattered throughout.
Right, throughout town. I think the big three are the development behind Marshall's, that assisted living place. There's the condo that we looked at off of across from the cemetery, and then the condo development across from Whole Foods. Those are the big three that if you look at the whole map, those stand out. However, it's the loss throughout the town that's the shocker.
And Tara, how long would it take to replace the 110 acres of trees that we lost?
Well, obviously, if we plant tree for tree, it's going to take 100 years for them to reach the same canopy. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we don't keep pace with it at all. So we do need to change our perspective in light of what we understand about climate change, in light of the heating of temperatures in the area. We need to plant more trees, both public trees, and we need to educate citizens so that they're planting more trees on their properties and caring for trees and not taking trees down that don't need to be taken down, which is another issue. But anyway, this study did a fabulous job of showing that the loss is throughout the town, which was actually a bit of a shocker to us on the tree committee, and it was sad to see the results. I don't know, I'm sitting here with the tree committee if someone wants to add anything.
But can I just ask one quick question? So this study was done, it's a 6-year study, and it was done 7 years ago.
No, it was just done last
Right, but
semester.
the data comes from
Oh.
up until 2016.
Yeah.
Correct? So data from 2016. So now we're 7 years forward, and if we lost 110 acres then, what are you thinking? What do you think the number is now? Is it double? And how many trees did we take down when we just did the new school, the elementary school?
Boy, that's a tough question. We know the answer to that question, but I don't have it in my
Yeah.
head.
Okay.
All right, how many trees for the school? Close, Brian says close to 100.
100 trees that we took down.
And they were big, many of them were mature, beautiful canopy trees. I mean, I don't want to speculate. What we hope is that a subsequent class of students will study this, take the study further for us, and we'll have more data to go on, because we would have been wrong if we had been asked to guess for those 6 years, we would have probably guessed a smaller loss. So I think actual data is the best to go on, but I think we can say, based on this unremarkable 6 years, this wasn't the 6 years that we thought had the big projects. It really showed, I think, something really concerning.
Yeah, is the 2017 data up through present time? Like, is that consistent in the same way that yours was consistent, such that somebody could study the more recent past?
I think if another class had done this in the future, they definitely couldn't use the National Agricultural Imagery Program data, just because, like I said, that data was taken in late October.
fall, yeah.
So they would have to try to find a different data source, which I'm sure there's data out there. They just, the key is to just find some satellite imagery that has a high enough resolution that you'll be able to get these, like, I mean, as you can see, you could see specific neighborhoods where, like, they lost a tree, and we're able to see that one tree had been lost just because the data was just such high resolution. So I think it's definitely possible for other students in the future to continue this project and look past 2016. But I mean, you can clearly see that there was a downward trend for tree loss. It just kept decreasing over time, and with the development of the school, I think that's what you guys were talking about, you guys lost 100 trees, so that number is still going down. And I'm assuming not a lot of trees have been planted since then. So it's definitely a downward trend. I'm curious to see if other students do this, how much it has decreased since 2016.
Yeah, it's really a critical need. I think, as we look at the town budget, I go back and I look at 2017, 18, where we spent, $3,000 on shade trees. Now we budget $10,000, but that sounds like it's a drop in the bucket in terms of really what we need. We've talked about, the importance of really just engaging not just the public about the public properties, but really thinking about private properties as well. We do see a lot of trees coming down on private properties. It would be interesting to think about where we could actually, plant more trees. We have Arbor Day coming up. We have schools. We have a lot of young, and frankly, older citizens that really, truly do care about the environment. And I do think, these types of studies and this type of work is extraordinary. And I'm grateful that you would find some time to really come over here and help Swampscott think more critically about these investments. We have to prioritize a budget every year, and there's not a line that goes without significant scrutiny. But if we can spend more money on trees, I truly will find a way to do that. I would love to have more community events, though, and really get the word out that trees help clean our air. We suffer more and more congestion and more air quality issues. Reducing that canopy makes our health more compromised. It's a serious issue that we have to think about. It does clean the water. It does make our planet a little cooler, but there are serious consequences to cutting down these trees, and we should have a plan to help address this. These are serious issues. They relate to our collective health, and we've got to come up with some strategies to just plant more trees and support more efforts to keep more of these trees from being cut down. I will tell you that I do get a lot of calls from residents that want to see trees cut down. Our Department of Public Works Director and Assistant Town Administrator has gone off and become a certified tree warden, and he's much more aware of how important these trees are and much more committed to ensuring that a lot of these older trees do survive. So with that, really appreciate the presentation and information that you've shared tonight.
Thank you.
Can I just want to, this is great, really. So quick question. Is this going to be something that we can access off of our GIS going forward as a layer that we can add to our GIS so residents can use our existing GIS system, add a layer now for this, which is really, really cool. I think I want to encourage the tree committee or residents generally oftentimes when people come with data, and then the question is, what do you do with data? Like, and one of the most confusing things about towns is then how do you bring this to life? And I appreciate that you're identifying the municipal reforestation program and the bill on the state level, but what can we do locally? And we did, thanks to the advocacy of some of you and now your continued involvement, we did the street tree bylaw, and it actually provoked, I think, a healthy debate at town meeting, that we don't often debate substantively too many things. This actually had a pretty meaty discussion, which I thought was great, because if anything, it raised the profile of the conversation, right? So you've already raised the profile, and you've kind of raised the social conscience of that, and I would just encourage and happy, I'm sure any of us would be happy to help you. We have town meeting coming up. So if there are other things that you think we should be doing locally, come back to us and suggest something for town meeting. If you look at our zoning bylaw, you'll see that trees, it's not a very often used word in our bylaw. Now there is, for site plan review, which are larger projects, encouragement to minimize tree loss of trees 6-inch caliper or greater, but it doesn't create as a standard for special permits. Did the proponent attempt to minimize the amount of tree loss of calipers 6 inches or more? And again, 6 inches being a somewhat critical number, but it can be any number of number. It's usually a certain caliper inch, certain feet off the ground, right? It's typically standardize the measurement, but there are towns that do that. There are towns that actually have a mitigation payment, which is if you put storms aside, storms happen, Mother Nature has her own rules and she decides those things, but if you're doing a project and you're removing a certain quantity, that there is a payment that either your plan has to show them to the extent practical you're planting those caliper inches comparable back on site, or you're doing an opt-out, you can do a mitigation payment. And there's a price per caliper inch that you pay that then goes to the town to plant in more appropriate areas, because not every area is going to be appropriate for replanting, so sometimes having those mitigation funds are good to be able to say, hey, we're going to work with the DPW and the Conservancy and the Tree Committee to identify these areas of really being, this is where tree growth is going to thrive, this is where it's needed, type of thing. So there are tools in other communities, and I just want to encourage you to, if you guys want to take next step, in who knows what town meeting does, but what it certainly will do is will cause a discussion, which I think is really important, because these type of things, just you all bringing that a year ago and just you being here tonight, again, just raises that social consciousness, and it gets us thinking about things that we otherwise, we intuitively know it, but we don't actively think it and we don't actively live it. So as you think about it, I think we have a month and a half left before we close the warrant or something close to that, and just an idea for you. Thanks for doing the work.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So speaking of what we can do, Peter mentioned the letter that you're sending to Senator Crichton. So I don't know, Jim, if you want to speak to that and talk to us about what we can do to support that. Yeah, you have a mic there. You can stay there, I think.
Okay, fundamentally, I think Verena provided the Select Board with the letter that we're going to be sending to Senator Crichton, asking him to co-sponsor this bill, and also a fact sheet that was prepared to support the bill, and it does include a number of the answers to a number of the things that you were asking about. What are the impacts of losing these trees? So there's good information for the Select Board to look at. I guess what I could add maybe is that the bill really kind of dovetailed with what your tree committee identified as two issues in Swampscott. One that we actually addressed partially a couple of years ago, where the town did put in $40,000 for extra trees, which is terrific. We're going to be giving away 100 redbud trees at the Earth Day celebration that the Swampscott Conservancy is paying for. So that, in general, things are kind of coalescing around. The other thing, aside from needing financing for trees, is the technical expertise beyond Gino to care for the trees that we have, to get the latest information on the pests that are attacking our our beech trees, for instance, including some of the real historic beech trees that we have right on town hall property. That technical assistance is also part of what's in this municipal reforestation bill. So here we are at the tree committee talking about these things, and the state is looking at providing through this reforestation bill some of the support that we identified as we need this here in Swampscott. So it made us think, well, this is really a no-brainer. We have Senator Crichton, who's an enlightened sort of person and who hasn't co-sponsored yet, and we want to encourage him to do that. Jenny Armini is a co-sponsor, if you read the letter, on the House side, and that it just seems like this is the time and the place to do something like that. And I don't know how common it is for town committees to write letters at the state level, but we have Jen Hernig, who actually does this for a living, who prepared the letter for us, a member of the tree committee, and we're going to send it out and then hope to have a discussion with Senator Crichton about it at some level. So if there were any questions that I might be able to answer or that Jen might be able to answer, just one technical detail. I think Peter and Sean were talking about possibly having the select board also prepare a letter. And Jen pointed out that that they're now not docket numbers, but actually just the other day, now there are bill numbers that have been identified. So if you are going to prepare a letter, you should refer to the bill numbers, both on the Senate and the House side, rather than the docket numbers. They're just two numbers. I have them here. The Senate number is Senate 452, and the House number is 869. So those would be the two docket numbers that we referred to in our letter, that now if you were going to write a letter, you'd want to use those bill numbers. Do you have any questions and Brian is here from the tree committee too. You've got a majority practically. Any questions at all about what we're trying to accomplish?
Any questions on this, on the letter?
Jim, just a general question. How many trees are we planting, excuse me, in town? How many, what are we doing and how, and where should we be if, in a perfect world?
Well, we do keep a track of that.
And it's in the annual report.
And it's in our annual report. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared.
No.
With this type of information. We could certainly provide it for
please.
You. Gino is our staff liaison, and he attends. I want to give Gino props here. He does attend every meeting. I don't think he's missed any meetings of the tree committee since we actually became a committee. And he's doing a lot of the data.
He's been salting and sanding the roads over the last 24 hours, so he's been quite busy. I did meet with him this afternoon. I think, David, to your question, we budget $10,000. We buy $10,000 worth of shade trees a year. I do buy more as I get to the end of the year, and so you can go back and look at, one year we spent $14,000. So I've said to Gino, look, if we can plant more, please, come back and try to, find ways to get more trees out there. We've talked about, frankly, having more community events to talk about the importance of trees. I've told Gino to suggest that maybe we should give you a beer or wine license for one of our summer concerts, where we can actually create more of an Earth Fest or some type of civic program that says, hey, we've got to have a more celebrated, discussion about the environmental stewardship that we have. It's not just trees, it's about really this habitat area and really just ensuring that we're making the right investments. We can raise money, we can actually use some of those funds for public education, but also for planting more trees. So lots of things that we can do.
Also, the tree committee, I believe you can purchase trees
through, like, in memoriam or in honor, correct? And you guys will facilitate the planting of those trees. So that's another thing you could do in town to support the trees individually as a citizen.
We just started that, yeah. Exactly. Brian, go ahead. You have something to say.
Yes, I'm Brian Drummond, old-time Swampscott guy. They, basically, we plant close to 50 trees a year, and then maybe we lose 30 from storms or people asking them to cut down, so net-net, we're not moving that much. If you look at the Old Town reports, there's years where they planted, 400 trees, so we're way low compared to where we are. And also, that $10,000 budget, a tree over a certain size, Swampscott doesn't have the equipment to take it down, and so if that gets contracted out, $4,000 comes out of the $10,000 budget to remove a large tree. So I don't know if Gino wants equipment to take down bigger trees, but that might be a cost saving. Not sure.
Last thing I just want to mention, the city of Salem had hired an arborist, and, there may be ways for Swampscott to reach out and work with Salem or other communities that are hiring arborists so that we can get that technical support and really use that technical support to help maintain a healthier tree canopy. We have some trees that frankly need some of that support, and you really do need an arborist to come in and evaluate, some of the trees that are struggling.
So I know that you said that we're working on a revised website, but these opportunities for what Katie was just talking about with donations and things of that nature are, and I'm grateful for all the benches our town has, but we have more benches per capita than I think anybody. And I think that's just because people recognize that as an opportunity because they walk by them and they see the opportunity. So that's why it's a self-promoting idea. And trees aren't self-promoting, and other things, other ways in which you can give to the town, in memoriam or otherwise, are just not as self-promoting. And so I wonder, when we do that, I just clicked onto the tree committee, then go into you have to go into another tab. You have to really know exactly what you're looking for to find it here. Just if we can just find a way to, again, I think some communities actually call it the giving tree, not having just to do with trees, but in a community, what other ways that you can give, right? You can donate, and it puts, without priority, what not just creates a whole bunch of things that the town decides are worthy of being there, so that people from everything from pets to animals to benches, although I could support a moratorium on benches, are things that we can do. And so if we can just keep that on the radar as well, I think that would just help.
Absolutely, Peter.
It's a little too buried in that.
You are definitely buried in there. No pun intended.
Here's the numbers for 2022. From the annual report, we planted 86 trees and we lost 67. The total size of the removed tree caliber was 1,285 inches, and the caliber of the new trees collectively was 172 inches.
Right, so big trees coming down, small trees going up.
But we do have to think about how the trees that we're planting now are for future generations, so we shouldn't say, well, because we can't plant big trees, we shouldn't plant trees.
Yep.
We do have to renew the tree stock, even though it'll take 50 years for them to provide it. You can't just throw up your hands. But thank you very much for anything else that we can.
Are you asking for us to make a motion to authorize you to sign a letter consistent with the tree committee's letter?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I'm just thought maybe, so I would make a motion to authorize the town administrator and chair of the board on our behalf to sign a similar advocacy letter as the draft from the tree committee that's in our packet.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks
Great.
for doing this.
Thanks so much.
And you are going to be sending a separate letter. We're going to send our letter out
You send your letter.
separately from yours. So that,
We can probably have a draft tomorrow. We can send them out tomorrow. To me, it just makes a whole lot of sense to have a volunteer group and a town government send that together and say, these are our priorities, please, help
Okay.
us advance them.
all right, understood. So you would send it then maybe to Verena? She signed our letter. You could send your letter to Verena, then she'll send, or no, Verena should send her letter
Yeah,
to you.
I think Verena should send it, and
All right.
we'll send it off, because, not that I understand how it all works, but I do know that,
Sure.
you know, when a governing body and a town
All right.
asks for some
All right.
support, generally that gets some attention.
So Verena will send that letter to you.
Be great.
Okay,
You know, I'm
I'll
sorry,
let
can
her
I say just kind of one more thing? Someone just actually pinged me, making a really good point. Who's the biggest tree killer in town?
Town?
National Grid.
Oh, well, yeah.
National Grid's the biggest tree killer. So I wonder, again, how communities have dealt with that and National Grid's contribution and responsibility in this, because frankly, they are our street trees. Now, admittedly, these street trees wouldn't be street trees today. We wouldn't plant those big species under wires, but the treatment and the butchery that goes on by National Grid. So I just wonder as well.
Might be a good
It'd be interesting to hear
agenda
back. It'd be interesting to hear back what other communities or what the utilities do to support this as well.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, the other side of that is that Paradise Road from the S curve up to Clark School used to be all big, beautiful oak trees that I think they're all gone at this point. But we can't plant street trees there without state permission. And that's a long, long process. So is there any way that, you know, we can get some blanket approval? That'd be helpful.
Absolutely. You know, it's probably worth mentioning that this summer, with the reconstruction of Paradise Road and Vinnon Square, the state had slated to cut down a number of trees, and but for some advocacy from a few members of the select board, those trees would have been cut down.
Right.
And so there was a significant push put in place by the town to preserve those trees, and those weren't very old trees, but it seems like the path of least resistance is just cut it down. And I do just want to share, we do care about these trees, and we have placed on private property owners and the state a sense that we want to keep these trees, if at all possible.
Right, and the sidewalk goes behind those trees, which saved them, but that only happened because I think the property owner of the mall agreed that the sidewalk could go on their property. That was a huge thing, a huge success.
Sometimes those relationships are important.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. All right, I think, why don't we move quickly to the appointment to the Board of Registrars of Voters, and then we'll open up the public hearing. So, Sean, are you taking this away for the appointment? Or Jared?
I'm sorry. Yes, we have Jared LaLibertE here, our town clerk, and we are recommending that we appoint our Board of Registrars. There's statutory standards for this. So Jared, could you just provide just an overview of the role of the Board of Registrars and individuals that we're going to be appointing?
Yeah, so the Board of Registrars oversees the voter rolls in town. They oversee the elections to a certain extent, especially recounts. They're basically a check upon the clerk's office in case there needs to be a recount. They run that. They also meet whenever there's, for instance, town meeting, when we ever need to do drawings for town meeting in case there's a tie. But their main duty is the census, under Massachusetts general law, is every year they are the ones through the clerk's office who does the census, the annual street listing census, the one that's done annually through the town, not the one that's done every 10 years through the federal government, which helps keep a track of all the residents of town. They also are required in the Massachusetts general law to publish a street listing every year, one of those old rules that are still on the book. That, along with maintaining the voter registrar, the voter database through the state, is their main priorities. Also, if anyone questions whether or not someone should be a voter, technically people have the legal right, if they see someone in town who they believe moved out of town, they adjudicate any of those disputes. If they say, you know, Jared LaLibertE, you don't live in town, I believe you've moved to Florida, you shouldn't be allowed to vote here, they adjudicate those disputes. Usually nowadays, a lot of these functions are done by the clerk's office in consultation with them. They don't do them specifically. Biggest cities tend to have their own separate board of registrars that acts a little bit more independently, but in smaller towns now, a lot of the kind of day-to-day functions of the board of registrars is handled, the administrative functions, by the clerk's office. But the board of registrars we have in town is very good. I've enjoyed thoroughly working with them the past year. They're very passionate. They're very dedicated individuals. Paul DeBoll, Mary Hobbins-DeChillo, and Janet Fisher have been very dedicated. They're always there to answer questions, to help out when needed, to do whatever they need to, spend time in the office, helping out around election time. And so Janet Fisher is stepping down after a number of years on the job. When that happens, what happens is that the Democrat and Republican committees in town are consulted based on who stepped down. Basically, as nonpartisan or trying to be fair and equal to everyone in town, the board must be equally split with no more than 2 members per major party, except for the instance of the town clerk. As long as they do not swing the makeup of the board, they are allowed to be on it. I am unenrolled, and so that is allowed under that. We currently have 2 Democrats, 1 Republican on the board. And so with Janet stepping down, who was one of the Democrats, the Democratic Party was consulted, and they put forth a name, and then also just to have another person on the board, my name was put up as well, just in the short term. To have another person on the board in case one of them can't sign something. Most of the stuff you need 3 Board of Registrars members to sign. If all of you turned in your nomination papers when you ran, on the back they do the certification for your resident and, your registered voter in town, and the fact that you, they certify the signatures of the registered voters who signed your petitions. So.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Jared? Is there a motion to appoint Paul DeBoll, Reverend Dr. Anita FARBER-ROBERTSON, Jared LaLiberte, and Mary DECHILLO?
So moved.
Second.
So can I just ask, I'm sorry, I'm confused. It's, our agenda says one thing, and then the packet says nothing. I just don't know who exactly we're appointing, because there's already staggered terms for these, so I'm just trying to understand.
So I don't think we need to appoint Paul because
Yeah, sorry,
he
we don't need to
expires
appoint Paul.
2024, so we'll be appointing everybody else.
Yeah, so Paul's the only one you wouldn't need to appoint.
Right.
I believe, as I understood it, Mary's term is up, Janet's stepping down, so you would appoint Anita and myself as new.
So just you and Anita?
And Mary is a reappointment.
And Mary's a
And
reappointment.
a renewal of Mary. Okay. So, revise the motion.
So it would be, to appoint, reappoint Mary DeChillo for a 3-year term expiring in 2026. Appoint Reverend Dr. Anita FARBER-ROBERTSON for a 3-year term, but that one's going to we're going to have that one, since she's filling somebody else's seat, expire in
2025.
Gotcha. And then the Jared LaLiberte, but he doesn't expire.
No expiration. That's the motion.
Second.
Second.
Okay.
I'll also say I've been told that it's Mary DeChillo's birthday, so happy birthday, Mary.
No way, happy birthday.
Oh.
Happy birthday, Mary. Sounds like a proclamation is in order.
Why isn't she celebrating with us here tonight? I know
Can't
the answer to
imagine
that question. All right, any further discussion on this?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Jared, happy birthday.
Thank you to
Mary.
those serving. All right, moving on to our public hearing. It's a reconsideration hearing for the Dockside Pub. At our last meeting, we had a public hearing for the transfer of a liquor license from Zest Friends to Dockside Pub, who are the new owners. it was brought to our attention from ABCC that there was some financial documentation that should have been submitted. It wasn't any oversight on the part of the applicant. It was just something that wasn't requested, and then when it was requested, they provided it. But in terms of what we need to do procedurally, we need to open up a reconsideration hearing for that same liquor license that we approved last week. So if there's a motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I don't know, Angelica, if you want to provide any more information from what I just described as to why we're here again talking about this.
You mostly covered everything. So what the problem was is Dockside is buying the dwelling and the business. So essentially, when they submitted their initial application, they didn't submit the loan documentation. So this is just a hearing to present this loan documentation to the board so that the board knows exactly where the monies are coming from. And it should be in your packet, all the new information. If it's not, I have it here. But I think that's mostly it. We just want to make sure, our role is to make sure that the money is coming from a legitimate source and that they provide the documentation to back up exactly the amount of money they're saying they're investing and also exactly where it's coming from.
And that has been confirmed by town staff?
Yep, the packet includes loans and businesses and small business administration. There's lots of due diligence in that. Our job is to make sure that it's complete. It does go on to the ABBC, and they do some additional due diligence, but certainly we are comfortable that it is a complete packet.
Great. I know there is some public comment, and it is a public hearing, so I invite members of the public to comment during the public hearing portion.
Thank you. Moira Farrell, Precinct 4. I live on Blaney Circle, and I've lived there for over 26 years. And I bought the house prior to the Humphrey Street Overlay District being declared. And I am here to voice, again, using this opportunity to voice how close my property is to that restaurant. At some points, it's 3 feet, and less than, it's like 18 and a half feet by their trash bin. And I object to this pub being open till 1 o'clock. The prior restaurants were more of a fine dining business. I think there's a different type of flair and clientele that would be there, and having it open till so late, it directly impacts me. A lot of noise is generated in that parking lot already, and late night, I have very interesting conversations while trying to get to sleep, and I'm already listening to air conditioners and ovens and compressors, and having a restaurant open that late with more activity impacts the quality of my sleep and my life, and I wanted to reiterate that. And I'm also here, I don't know if we're bundling this up with the entertainment license. We're already hearing Mission on the Bay. We're already hearing, a lot of activity from Humphrey Street that has been amplified with the new restaurants that have been opened. Again, I'd like to say that my property was purchased prior to the Humphrey Overlay District, where restaurants weren't allowed, and it's really negatively impacted my property value. And I have spent, over $250,000 in taxes here, and the only part of, I use the roads, I don't have children that go to school, happy to pay for schools, happy to pay for trees, but I'm a low impact, low user taxpayer, And, yeah, this is burdensome to me. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming down and for your comments last week. And I know the applicant, responded that he really wants to be a good neighbor and work with you. I know that doesn't mean anything until it shows something. I think that, certainly we're here and the town administration's here should incidents occur, or if you feel like things are happening that are, unacceptable, then I think you should be coming to town hall or otherwise and work with town hall and try to help figure it out. But my hope is that the applicants are sincere in their want to work with the neighbors. And thanks for coming here.
You hear Mission on the Bay where you are?
Yes.
And have you contacted the town administrator or anybody about this? Because you should not be hearing Mission on the Bay where you are.
Mission on the Bay, when they have music on their
Right.
what is that?
Rooftop deck.
Uh-huh.
Deck.
But they closed that in 2 years ago?
We hear it.
You still hear it?
Yes.
All right,
We
and-
have heard it.
You have heard it. So when you do hear it, do you reach out to anybody? Or, because my concern is that you are going through a hardship and that these restaurants aren't supposed to be causing a hardship, and I don't even think they want to cause a hardship, but they don't know, possibly don't know. I'm just wondering if you're reaching out to the town administrator or to the town to let them know that you do hear.
I have reached out to G's a number of occasions, especially when they park their, the delivery trucks. There's a lot of delivery trucks with compressors, and oftentimes they're parked illegally, fire hydrants, wrong side, and when you try to get out of Lane Street and take a left, and you've got two parking spots, double parked, of huge delivery trucks. It's been very much a problem, and I've spoken to G's about that a couple of times. But they still do it, they still do it. They still park on the wrong direction, and it's amazing the amount of stress of delivery. We have no space for delivery trucks to park, so they block driveways. They, park illegally, and I wish someone would invent a compressor that does not make so much noise, for the bounces off the buildings and is magnified, and it bounces off that fence and is magnified. I can only, complain so many times before you become, that person, and you lose, it loses its punch because, oh, there she is complaining again.
Sure. Ms. Farrow, I want you to know that you have not become that person, and I take these concerns seriously. And I would certainly be very much interested in meeting with this new proprietor, if he is going to move forward, and you, and really talking about ways that we can mitigate noise and we can ensure that they will be a good neighbor. I do trust that many of the business owners on Humphrey Street understand the importance of being good neighbors. I've had several discussions with these proprietors about making sure that they have music that is within certain decibels. I know our police department has decibel readers, and when we do get complaints, we do go down and measure, and we try to ensure that there's a reasonable standard of care that each of the businesses keep with the neighbors. But that notwithstanding, it's a busy commercial corridor, and I do think that there's, a reasonable balance that we have to strike. You don't strike me to be unreasonable in any of your concerns, and certainly I will do my best to try to work with this business to ensure that if they can insulate, if they can do things that really help ensure your quality of life is not unfairly intruded upon, that they take those steps.
Thank you.
Any other public comment online or in person? All right, with that, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any further discussion or questions about the reconsideration of this liquor license?
So
Transfer.
it does worry me, I hear a resident just a few feet from a business, 1 AM in the morning. I do have a concern, it does trouble me. But we're talking about a liquor license right now. There was a liquor license there before for Zest Friends, right? Correct?
Yep.
It's a transfer, yes.
So it's a transfer of that. So that's where it makes it there was a liquor license there, and they've purchased the building for a liquor license. So that's where there's a problem. And I think that, part of me wants to change my vote, but the other part of me feels that this is a business, there was a liquor license, and I have faith that Sean can have conversations and really work it out to minimize any impact on your living. I might have different comments on entertainment, though, so I am concerned here, and I too live in an area where I have to listen to stuff. However, I was that person that made enough complaints, and Mission on the Bay they changed their ways. I haven't had any problems with it. So I really do think that businesses want to have a good, solid business, and they want to be good neighbors, and I'd like to give this company a chance.
Okay. Any other comments? Is there a motion to approve the liquor license transfer?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Farrell, for coming.
We're talking about entertainment at the end of the meeting.
I did close it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, we're talking about the
Entertainment license is actually, I think that's part of our consent agenda, right?
Yeah.
But if, when we get to that, we'll get to that, and if we're moving it out, yeah, so.
I'm sorry.
So the entertainment license is part of our consent agenda, which we typically pick up at the end of our meeting. So we will be talking about that then. Right? I'm right on that, right?
Yeah, you're right on that.
Yeah. Okay, so, next is discussion and possible vote, but probably not, on approving a policy on accepting statues on behalf of the town. I think we have someone from Open Space here. Is there a microphone near you?
Okay, well, I am Richard Smith. I am a member of the Open Space and Recreation Committee. I am actually also a member of the Historic District Commission. And there's been an issue that's been discussed in both committees over the last several years about town policy on on gifts, monuments, memorials, and so forth. And there's been some concern that Monument Avenue is kind of filling up with monuments. And that from the Historic Commission's point of view, it begins to impinge on the original intent of the Olmsted design. And I think it also creates a situation in which we have a lot of monuments kind of crowded together on the median strip in a way that doesn't really make it very easy to engage with these memorials in a way that you can really contemplate what they mean, what the sacrifice meant, and what it means to the town that people went out and did what they did, that they are memorialized. And I think from both committees, there's a sentiment that we'd like not to have the monuments just continuing to pile up there. And part of that is that there are other places in town that maybe ought to be considered as potential locations. As we talked about it, we had a subcommittee formed with myself, Brian Longan from Open Space, and Jared Germa from Historic District Commission. And we did some thinking about it. We looked at the map of the town and identified a number of potential sites. But we also kind of broadened the discussion a little bit to thinking about questions of other kinds of donations to the town. And I think we've talked about benches in the past, but there are other things that come up from time to time, and that there ought to be a thoughtful process for how to assess potential donations. I think some folks, Peter, you may remember the Chinese sculpture memorial that some folks from out of town were trying to give Swampscott a few years ago that I think creates is a little problematic, I guess would be the best word for it. But I think to have a process that can thoughtfully consider these kinds of gifts. There is some artwork that's in storage right now, and we've discussed amongst ourselves some potential locations for them. But I think if there's a process that engages some people both on the design side and on the town side who can help to make assessments of what these kinds of donations might be best suited for, where they might best be located, and what kind of resources, town resources, the acceptance of these gifts might require. Just suggested that there might be a process of assessment that we could set up. The Historical Commission has recently established a policy on gifts to the Historic Commission's collections, and that kind of inspired the idea that there ought to be some criteria. We've done a draft, but there could be other thoughts on that we can collectively be able to give thoughtful consideration to what happens when somebody is offering a gift and what could be done with it. I think if you have copies of the letter that came from the Open Space Commission, the third page has a kind of draft checklist of potential items that could be considered in looking at these. So this is not an emergency. It's not quite the urgency of, I think, the last couple of topics you've had on the discussion, but it's something that in the long run would really be worth having for the town.
Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight and for bringing this to our attention and to both of the committees that you work on. I think that for me, I did think about when we accepted the gift this past year that, I know there are communities that are more apt to receive donations like the one we accepted last year, on a more regular basis. Mm-hmm. and that they do have policies in place. And I think it does make sense to have some policies and guidelines in place such that, we're being more proactive about it than trying to figure out and being reactive when these things come up. So I think it's a worthwhile policy to pursue. I'm not, just personally, I'm not sure what my position is currently on a moratorium on Monument Avenue. I wonder about a policy about memorials and monuments as well in terms of their location, and perhaps having a process in place and I don't know if there is one, but for how those decisions are made, could be also a reasonable approach to that. And again, I just don't know what the demand is currently to do more there, or like, is there sort of a threat of more monuments, if you will? So I'm not sure if a moratorium is the right answer, but this is just this is my initial thoughts about it. I don't know if anyone else has any questions about this or thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a good conversation to have. I know when we were discussing those sculptures which we accepted, we all asked a lot of questions about where they might go and where they might be displayed, how the community might enjoy them, but we didn't have any of those answers at the time. And to Neil's point, maybe being proactive and having some sort of checklist that would go through before we accept the gift to say, these are the areas we're thinking about utilizing them, this is how the community might benefit from them, and then weighing that against the cost it might incur to the town. It would probably be a better order of events to have those discussions than to accept it and then figure out afterwards.
Right.
So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Anyone else?
Richard, I just want to thank you and for really bringing this to our attention and not only bringing it to our attention, but actually, putting together, a checklist and your recommended, list of sites where these, where these would be most appropriate in your mind. So I think this gives this board a lot of information and a lot of things to consider, as we're moving forward. So I certainly appreciate that.
All right.
So I'm happy you brought this forward, and I do agree with this. And so I just really want to know, what would the next steps be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I was going to suggest, but I'm open to other ideas, is that in terms of the donation that we received this past year, which the hope is to install it soon, is to have certainly the open space committee participate in helping make a recommendation on those possible locations, and maybe think about that process. But also, I think longer term, in terms of a policy, I'd invite that committee and can work. I think Katie, you're the liaison to that committee, but that committee to come with more recommendations on how a long-term policy may work, with examples from other communities, and and then we can start to actually draft something that would be adoptable over the next year or two.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Richard, this is great. It does help us kind of bring some structure around, something that can get overwhelming at times. I do think having committees add input into, how we set some of the memorials up in town, can be very helpful. There are typically, policies that outline a reasonable due process for how monuments and memorials are set up, but ultimately, the select board is the governing body of the town. They ultimately, have the prerogative to really define, where these monuments go.
Any other questions or comments about this? Thanks, Richard, for coming. I appreciate it, and I think we'll follow up. Katie will follow up with the committee, and we'll keep moving in this direction.
Very good.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We're moving on to the Traffic Advisory Committee. I believe we have Officer Lloyd and Chief Archer here with us to discuss parking at Phillips Beach as well as Humphrey Street speed limits.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hi.
you want to start?
Yeah, which one do you?
Are we just going to?
Yeah, sure. We'll start off with Humphrey Street and the speed zones. I wrote like a little memo here. With the approval of the Select Board, Swampscott's TSAC meeting on March 2nd discussed the Humphrey Street speed zones in the area of Gibbs Gas Station to where Humphrey meets Atlantic Ave. So it's that huge stretch. Actually, you know what? I gotta give you guys a copy of this. We weren't able to send you guys anything in terms of like a map, but this is kind of a rough. Thanks, just something to look at. So from the span of Humphrey Street from Gibbs Gas Station all the way to Atlantic Ave, that area. So a resident in the area of Humphrey Street initially generated a concern of speeding near the crosswalks at Cindy's Pizza and Pleasant Street. In the meantime, we've placed a speed board in that area to collect data and advise drivers of their current speed as they pass through on Humphrey. There will be ongoing and future discussions regarding the traffic calming options we will kind of come to have there. Since the topic has been discussed by the traffic committee, the speed zones along this stretch of Humphrey were also brought up. The main issue brought up was the sporadic and lack of signage for the posted speed zones for motorists to follow in this area. In this stretch of Humphrey, there are zones of 20, 25, and 30. Specifically brought up, there's an area of Humphrey Street just after Cindy's, outbound heading towards Atlantic Ave, Marblehead bound, that's set at 20 miles an hour. It was kind of jokingly in jest referred to as a speed trap in our last meeting, but realistically in this area, a long stretch of straight-away road in this setting, it's very difficult to drive under or at 20 miles an hour. So it's, from a patrol perspective, with very little to zero compliance of motorists, for this speed advisory, just based on the natural flow of traffic in the stretch of road, it doesn't make sense there, and everybody kind of agreed with the same sentiment there. Another speed posting example on Humphrey Street is traveling in the opposite direction across the police station by Millet towards the downtown businesses and Fisherman's Beach. In this area, there's a posting of 30 miles an hour, but then it jumps down very shortly after to 25 miles an hour, just before the florist shop at 470 Humphrey. It then becomes 25 from there all the way to the Lynn line. At the 30-mile-an-hour sign, motorists are soon traveling into a more congested area of Humphrey Street, where there are parked vehicles and businesses by 503 Humphrey Street, Boston Sports Medicine, among other businesses there. This area was discussed to be an odd spot for this posted speed. It's an old sign headed toward more congestion of the downtown area. The remaining areas in this stretch of Humphrey, they don't have a posted limit, therefore assuming that the speed is set at 25 if it's not posted, according to the town-wide advisory. It was voted on and recommended by the committee that in order to make a more reasonably flowing and uniform clear-cut speed zone, to change all areas in this stretch of Humphrey to 25 miles an hour, and to add updated signage in this area where necessary to reflect this change for a proper motorist notification. With your approval, this would then make Humphrey Street from the Lynn line all the way to Atlantic Ave in both directions set to the same suggested speed of 25 miles an hour. It's not a major change as a whole, if you can see it on the map. It's only a couple of areas, but with more clear-cut posted signs and maintaining a proper speed limit throughout the whole stretch of Humphrey, without any significant fluctuations from 20 to 30 or 20 to 25, I just think it would be, we think it would be more just uniform, just having the whole street 25. So that's our suggestion.
So let me ask you, in the last 5 months, do you have any data there for how many warnings and tickets you've written month by month?
Yeah, I could go back and look at that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing.
Mm-hmm. So we put that speed board up at 670 Humphrey. The main concern was speeding by the crosswalks, by Cindy's crosswalk and then the Pleasant Street crosswalk. Yeah. So we put a speed board there for the whole month of February. The average speed was 29 miles an hour. And right there technically is 25. That's an issue that we were considering in terms of traffic calming within that crosswalk area, within that zone, because it does get very congested with the pizza shop and then the dog grooming, that it just cuts down to a very narrow spot. So in that area to be 29 miles an hour is fast, and it needs to be addressed. But that's
Yeah.
later on down the road.
Yeah, I mean, the main point was there are just too many varying speed limits. Unposted areas, which, you know, are 25 by town ordinance. But they vary a lot. Some of them, as Sergeant White said, are old signs that just happen to be there, and some of them are just kind of inexplicable. The 20-mile-an-hour one just kind of pops up out of nowhere. So the first step that we're hoping to gain is just a consistent flow down, and then we could, as I said, what initiated this was a resident concern about specifically the area at Cindy's Pizza, which does get congested. You know, around lunchtime, people park there. There's limited parking, and it narrows the street, and there's a crosswalk there as well. But as we looked at that sort of opened up the conversation for it, and then we really just sort of examined what are the circumstances going down that whole stretch from just before the ball field to the Atlantic Avenue fork. And, you know, that was the first thing that just jumped out at us. There were just too many different guidances in different speeds in different directions, and it's just kind of all over the place.
I think the lack of signage kind of goes with the flow. It's, if there were more signs, more updated things within the area, I think that there would be more compliance within that area.
Is there any discussion about dropping the speed to 20 from the area surrounding the crosswalks, like a little before and a little after, just because that area is congested, you know, in the spring and the fall, especially with people trying to come to the fields and, you know, kids crossing the street, and I just wondered if there was any conversation about that.
I think it would be a little tricky because just it's such a long straightaway of wide open space. The natural flow, it's very difficult to drive under that within those conditions unless we somehow came up with a way of fixing the road and engineering it to a point where it makes us drive slower. But in a wide open straightaway space, I think it would be really difficult to drive below that set speed. But I think more than anything, 25 would be a reasonable place to start. Because I mean, running radar on there, people are going upwards to 40.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think with more signs, with more enforcement, there's going to be more compliance.
Maybe there's something we could do in the crosswalk itself to
Right.
notify people driving even at 25, because 25 is unfortunately more like 30 when people are coming down that stretch of road. So maybe there's something we could do in the crosswalks to notify people to slow in those areas.
Yeah, I agree.
I think just having the consistency is certainly a great step, and certainly increased signage is going to be most helpful. It is, I mean, it's confusing for me when I'm driving and I see different speeds and going different ways. So I think I'm certainly supportive of the 25 throughout, and you know, thank you to the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee for bringing this to our attention.
So this, just so I make sure I'm understanding it, where you've written here is approximately where the signs are?
Right. Yeah, and the highlighted blue, that shows the 25-mile-an-hour zones. So the majority of it is 25, but the other areas, they're just kind of all over the place.
And the idea would be to replace all these signs with 25 and then have additional ones as well?
Right, just more well-posted, just to kind of remind motorists that let's keep it around that. There's nothing in the area.
So can the traffic committee also request from the DPW to have those crosswalks repainted, and also the possibility of, you know, the speed board, you know, like the speed board, the speed thing that you have over by St. John's?
Yeah, what's the
Can we get,
crosswalk?
yeah, the
Solar
blinky thing?
Oh, the crossing, yeah, yeah.
Can we get those?
I think
over those
something needs
crosswalks?
to definitely be addressed
that'd be a good
within
idea.
that area,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
The blinky thing is definitely,
Yeah, the blinky thing.
the blinky things.
For when Katie and the kids are crossing the street.
And Stella's chasing
Yeah.
after a ball.
The committee is definitely still going to continue to work on the area. This is just the first step. It's just getting a uniform speed, and then we can come back and revisit the next steps. But I think I'm a big fan of the flashing crosswalk signs.
Are there any of those along the field, like anywhere?
There is an actual pushed across where it actually changes to a
At
red light
Pleasant,
at
right?
at the ball
Pleasant.
field.
Right.
Yeah.
But in that
Actually
stretch,
not,
there's
I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it's off of
yeah,
Pleasant,
yeah.
which then creates problems because people
Right.
get right onto Humphrey and they have to
Yeah.
immediately, it just,
not.
Right.
That's right, yeah.
we should blame Olmsted for that.
But no, there are none of those like flashing like trail crossing.
Yeah.
lights in that area.
Olmsted.
So while the traffic committee is here, I just want to remind you that I get more calls per week about speeding in neighborhoods. And my phone calls haven't slowed down. So I do want to know what's going on with warnings and tickets. I'm not a big ticket fan, but warnings, warnings, warnings. And I do want to see the data.
Sure, yeah, we can send it to you. for sure.
Mhm. Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations, Sergeant White, on your promotion. Well deserved. I agree with Mary Ellen completely, and this is really to the town administrator, and then for you to figure out where to go with this. But we talked about it actually when we had the budget meeting the other week. Not that numbers should be the only way that you tell things, but fiscal year 22. Sorry, fiscal year 21, we had 51,000 in fines and forfeits. And year before that, 81. Year before that, 78. Year before that, 79. Last year, we had 30. This year, we projected 75. We then reforecasted down to 29, and year-to-date, we're at 13. And it's not about the money at all. Like, I could care less about the money. It's more about, it feels like when Chief Casada was here and he mentioned that dollar amount, I think, or he was here and we were talking about it. The reality, I think this is great, and I'm so glad you're focusing on this, and I'm 100% with you on it. But we're not going to solve this street by street and section by section. Like, I mean, you guys will have to be meeting 24 hours a day to do this. We're just not going to. And I think as though we, despite good intentions, our focus on pedestrian safety, goes up and down a bit here, and we've done some good things, and you and the DPW and the police department have done some great things, so I do appreciate it. However, there still lacks a everyday focus on pedestrian safety, and that, so we can post the speed limit, but, to Mary Ellen's point, if we're not enforcing it the best we can, and again, I get that we can't give tickets, and, again, we went through a whole analysis a few years ago, and I think, back then, 80% of the traffic stops resulted in a warning. Only less than 20% resulted in a citation being issued. And again, I don't know what's good practice or not. That's not my area. But we were still, the numbers show that, that still is a lot of stops then. So what's happened that's changed so significantly? And I know some of it's going to be post-pandemic stuff. Great, but we're now out of the pandemic, and something's changed. And it'd just be interesting to know what that is. Like, why is that the case? And I don't expect answers because I don't think you necessarily will have them tonight. But I'm just, we sit and have these conversations periodically when they come with ideas or we get phone calls and stuff, and it doesn't, I consistently leave feeling like we just haven't gotten it right yet. Right? We haven't gotten the focus yet. I mean, we had a lot of conversation about Pine Street last year, and we voted 3 things on Pine Street. One had to do with restricting parking in an area, and no signs have gone up restricting parking in that area yet. The other one had to do with speed bumps, which were fine, but they went down the second the trees started changing colors. They went down because of the winter, I'm assuming. But, so they were up for 6 weeks, and they've been down for 3, 4, or 5 months now. And we talked about, come back to us and talk to us about other speed bumps, permanent. There are communities that have permanent speed bumps, or speed humps, I'm going to call them as well. Just things that, we haven't had any conversations about that. And then there was another stop sign, and I don't know if the stop sign actually happened. I think, so I apologize on that one. It just feels as though we have these conversations and we ebb and flow. And I just ask that we figure out a way, and frankly, it's a staff. The committee does a lot of work, but I don't think it's reasonable to have the committee be I don't think it's reasonable for us to be looking to a volunteer committee to be the ones responsible. I think there's a staff person, there's staff people. I don't know what it is, but somehow we are such a pedestrian community, but yet it's not, the reticence for speed humps or traffic calming measures is remarkable to me. I mean, I go through other communities and I'm going over them, and they can be plowed. They can be a whole bunch of things, and it just forces cars to, it takes the pressure off of enforcement, right? I only need to bottom out once, and I guarantee you I'm going to slow down on Pine Street, right? Or stop using it as a cut through, or start using the right roads for the right reasons type of things. And I just ask that as we think about it, and as you advance this, it just feels like we keep having some version of the same conversation, and I really am so grateful that you guys are focusing on it, but it's also not reasonable, I think, to think this is how we're going to solve.
Yeah, I do think it has to be a priority. I don't want to say anything that doesn't take that sense of urgency away. The most significant danger that we face in Swampscott is traffic safety, pedestrian safety. We're a densely settled town. Every one of the intersections is in need of a major investment, and we've thought critically about how to not only apply for more grants, but really, evolve some conversations. There are very few days that don't involve some discussion about traffic or pedestrian safety in town. And last week I had a meeting with the chief. We did talk about enforcement. We talked a little bit about some of the pedestrian safety with our community development team as well. And certainly I will continue to follow up and think about ways to advance these discussions. Those speed bumps on Pine Street did work. I have talked with our DPW director and assistant town administrator about trying to find a more permanent application that does stay over the year. I did get a few complaints, but frankly, it's more important for me to know that those streets are going to be safe than to hear a few folks complain that it's difficult to drive over those bumps. I'm okay with those types of complaints. Again, I think our police department did do a great job with enforcement on Pine Street when we had that targeted enforcement, because it did seem to calm traffic. But we need to keep up with some of these efforts to match some of these infrastructure investments, whether it's stop signs or speed bumps, with enforcement. At some point, too many warnings doesn't do the trick. I mean, that actually doesn't have as much of a corrective measure as tickets. I think we've talked about that previously. The thing that really does make a difference is having a little bit more of that harder standard for enforcement.
So can we do this? Can we say either next month or the month after, 60 days, let's say 2 months, can we have an actual on the agenda, a plan on how this is going to be addressed, and then can we have this on the agenda once a month going out so we really get an update on how the plan is getting dealt with? Because we do keep talking about it. It does keep up and down, but can we just get it consistently so we see exactly where the plan is going and if we're getting to our goals?
Sure.
So that's, I'd say 30 days or 60 days? I'd rather say 60 days because we're in budget season.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
60 days from now, give or take, you present what the plan is on how these issues are going to be addressed, and after that, we go month by month and start seeing how your plan's working.
So look, I mean, I think that, and I appreciate Mary Ellen's suggestion. This is tough because it's easy to say, well, we'll just do these three things. Oh, we'll get the speed bumps back on Pine Street because we just talked about Pine Street, right? What the hard thing is the comprehensiveness of it all, right? And respectfully, I don't think it's going to take many more conversations for you to figure out what's the permanent speed hump that can last all seasons.
Yeah.
We are not inventing anything new.
We
are literally not inventing anything new.
They're a mile and a half away.
So
they're
I'm
in
just
Salem, and they're right next to the hospital.
And then I remember when we were having
taken folks over to see them. I know exactly where they are.
But as the town administrator, you actually, I think, and us have the ability to do things, and so let's do them.
Execute.
And I remember a few years ago we had conversations about and I can't remember which project was it that we were discussing, that there was a lot of concern about the pass-through from Humphrey Street through Aspen and Sherwood and Fuller and Greenwood to kind of cut through and avoid the backup that happens on Humphrey Street. This is pre-pandemic, and frankly, we haven't had the backup since of that magnitude, thanks to the pandemic. But I remember there was a lot of conversation about all that traffic coming through, and I think unarguably 90% of those roads weren't designed for that, right? They are destination roads. They are roads that lead people to their homes, not to another road, right? More or less. There are some streets, I'm going to say Greenwood that were designed a little differently, or there are some streets that are designed for a slightly different volume, right? Instead of being tertiary, maybe they're secondary roads. But all those streets in some form or another could have years ago benefited from some permanent traffic calming measures, right? That would have deterred, because us humans are wonderfully efficient. We will not go over speed bumps if we can avoid speed bumps, right? And I know it's like water, we'll go find another place, but we could have chased that a long time ago. As an example of something. And I really do appreciate Pine Street being the place where we're focusing on right now. And I, again, I think those speed bumps were great, but those were harsh speed bumps, right? So when you went over them, you felt them, which is great, but you also heard them if you're a neighbor, right? And so that's where speed humps, that's where these things evolve into, which is what's a tool that doesn't rattle or doesn't rattle the car or something but still achieves the slowdown effect of doing these things. And I think that it's asphalt and man hours and signage, right? And so I say this because you're doing a budget, you're doing a capital budget, you're doing a whole bunch of things. So what I don't want to do is, Mary Ellen's is great. I just don't want to get to the conversation and then say next year's budget or grants that we don't have, And you've talked about it already, so I know I'm predicting. My clairvoyance is that we're going to see something about pedestrian safety projects in your budget, but that's important because I think it is not huge dollars on so many of these streets in so many of these ways, and then we can create policies so that when people come and say, we're not just addressing the problem of the squeaky wheel, quite literally, the person that comes and says, my street is bad, let's fix your street. Instead, we say, hey, this is our policy on these types of streets, right? Traffic calming these are the types of traffic calming that are appropriate to type of things. And so we can be more proactive, or at least have a set policy as opposed to just being responsive to a street because they came forward or the committee was able to spend the time needed to study one area. It just gives us more tools. I think that these systems work, right? We just gotta, I get it, we have limited resources, person hours and dollars to do these things, but I will impact people's lives more so than 80-90% of the other stuff that we talk about.
Understood.
Here.
I will say, it will be a priority in the capital plan. It will be one of the most significant projects that I will be recommending. And certainly, I do, down to my toes, believe it's the most clear and present danger to the welfare of the safety of the citizens of Swampscott. Pedestrian safety has to be a priority, and I don't want to, fail to just highlight how important this is. I share the board's concern that we can't talk our way around this. We have to start investing in traffic calming infrastructure that will make it more challenging for people to drive fast or dangerously through the town. I think, when we think about distracted driving, when we think about all of the challenges with a very densely settled community that is dealing with a lot of folks that have the love affair with the automobile, we really have to be thinking about ways to make every one of the intersections in the town, every one of the crosswalks safer.
Thank
you. Right, so I think we
have to vote on it?
do we vote on support for this measure? I think
we have
do,
to vote
right?
on it. Yes.
Yeah. So is there a motion to support the recommendation to change the signage on Humphrey Street to consistently be posted as 25 miles per hour as well as additional signage posted?
So can I just have it be that to Sergeant Lloyd's statement that in doing this will make it consistent from the Lynn line all the way to the Humphrey Atlantic split at 25 miles an hour, since we don't actually know any of that, and it wouldn't surprise us to find out there's another area that just, just because the way we sign things, just have it be that. And so I'll just make the motion to have it be from the Lynn line to the Humphrey Atlantic Ave split posted at 25 miles an hour for the entire length,
Second.
both ways, sorry. Yeah.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Thanks for that. Moving on, we have the Phillips Beach parking discussion.
Sure. So this issue's been probably one of the longest recurring issues before the traffic committee. It's been a subject of discussion regularly for the year that I've been on the board, and Sergeant White's heard about it a lot also. You know, in summary, in the area of Phillips Beach, which is, one of our most popular beaches, it's a beautiful beach and it's attractive. It draws people in. There is only recreational parking allowed on on one side of Shepherd Avenue. We feel it's just basically an insufficient amount of parking, given the amount of a draw that asset is. The request, the concern that's been brought to the committee consistently for a few years now, actually, from my understanding, is that we expand the recreation parking. Last year, the town issued 2,957 recreation or / beach parking stickers.
How many?
2,957. Obviously, those stickers are recreation. They're not strictly beach parking stickers, but that's primarily what they are. They're not only for people going to Phillips Beach, and obviously everyone doesn't go at the same time. But Sergeant Lloyd could probably speak better than I can to the experience of when they do enforcement in the police department. I know does constant enforcement during the summertime in the area of Phillips Beach. It's pretty evident that people are filling the appropriate parking area, and there's sort of just spill over into the neighborhoods. And there are a couple of different issues. There are people who just don't have recreation stickers at all. There is some confusion. We're pretty confident between people who have resident parking, because a lot of the area allows resident parking, and then there is recreation parking. And frankly, the signs look a lot the same. So there's some confusion about that. But, even amongst the people that are attempting to be compliant, on a warm summer day, the area just does not have enough, limiting it to Shepherd Avenue just doesn't provide, we feel, adequate parking. So the request was made of the committee, and after a few meetings and considering it and visiting the area, the committee voted unanimously to expand the recreation parking in the area of basically the beach side of Atlantic Avenue from Ocean Avenue all the way to Blodgett Avenue, the streets in that neighborhood. So to expand recreation parking to Ocean Ave, Longley Ave, Brown Road, Bradley Avenue, Shepherd Ave, Cutting Road, Charles Road, and Blodgett Avenue, in addition to Shepherd, on one side of the road, and having it remain resident parking on the other side. So that sounds like a lot of roads. That sounds like a lot of expanded recreation parking. Our feeling is that those roads aren't immediately going to fill up with recreational parking. It's just going to give people more options about where to park, and rather than, randomly selecting this street or that street, we just thought we'd take it as an area and look at it as a neighborhood, and this is the neighborhood of Phillips Beach. And, honestly, my suspicion is that the roads will not be heavily impacted with people coming with recreation parking suddenly. We feel that, limiting it to Shepherd Avenue is just a little bit too restrictive, given the attractiveness of the beach and given the size of the beach. You've got, X number of square feet of beach is going to accommodate so many people, which are going to come in an average of 2 or 3 people per car, and they're going to overload Shepherd Avenue. So we're almost drawing people into an area that they're going to get ticketed because they're going to continue to park. Additionally, we voted to alternate the side of the road annually, so that not only one side of the road is impacted by recreation parking, and so basically to align the side that allows recreational parking on odd-numbered years to be on the odd-numbered sides of the street, and so on even-numbered years to be on the even-numbered sides of the street, if that makes sense.
Kind of creates a little fairness, just saying like one side of the road isn't better off than the other. If it's doable to alternate each year, but it's a good, fair suggestion.
So on the proposed schematic that you provided, the color coding, if we could just, the green is what already exists for beach parking.
Yes.
The blue would be residential.
The blue is residential. And
The red is no parking, and the orange would be the proposed addition.
parking. Yeah, and if I could just add that, that was produced before the scheme of alternating sides, so I can't vouch that where you see the orange proposed is, they're all either even or odd sides of the road.
Understood.
So I do have to ask, so this was brought up to me by an individual on Middlesex Road, and he asked, why is it that as a taxpayer who is even forced to buy a recreation sticker, which I think he was opposed to, well, why is it he just can't park where he wants over there if he's paying taxes to have these roads taken care of?
On the committee, we get requests all, most
You asking
months.
me?
I'm asking
Why do
anybody.
you pay taxes?
I hope he's
asking-
watching, so he knows
No,
I'm
not
asking
the
the question.
Most months, we get requests on the committee. I shouldn't say that. Often, we get requests on the committee to have resident-only parking. People, for one reason or another, feel that they're impacted and they're unable to park in front of the house, or unable to have guests, home health aides, whomever park and come and see them. We generally try to find a rationale why that is, and the biggest rationale would be if you live someplace that has an unusual draw for other people to come there, like the train station, or the beach. Most people, most people live in an area that's just a neighborhood, and, I understand why people might want to reserve more parking in front of their home, and just have it available for their guests or their needs. But in most cases, I agree with the person who reached out to you from Middlesex Ave. These are neighborhoods, and you should be able to visit them and move about freely. There just are some places that have an unusual draw that are going to bring in lots of people, and it's going to make it almost impossible for the people that live there to do some of the normal things that the rest of us take for granted. So that would be the answer that I would give to that person. If you happen to live someplace and there's this amazing thing like Bill's Beach right next to your house, well, everyone in the world's going to try to park in front of your house, and your friends can't come park there, and you can't have, the services that you need come park there. So there are occasions, there are areas that we feel deserve a little bit of a different treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that question is a different one. I think the question is like, why do you have to pay for a beach sticker? Right.
There was actually kind of two questions in
Right.
there, and I'm gonna guess the reason you pay for a beach sticker is because we have so much uses of our beach, so it helps with our expenses.
It does. I do think, as the chief mentioned, it's a really significant draw. And so, having a program where you have to pay for a sticker does help kind of ensure that, we're going to manage, the number of people that, are going to have that pass to be able to park in that area. It does kind of put a little bit of a restriction on it in the sense that somebody has to pay for that. And so it helps to curb, what would be just a opportunity for anybody to go down there and park. And so it's restrictive.
But you don't mean, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I have to believe that if somebody had a financial hardship who wanted to obtain a beach sticker, there is a way for them to go about doing that, though.
I'd have to look into that, but certainly, you know, I would certainly, you know,
If
report
there
back
is
to
not,
the
I would
board.
like
Yeah.
to propose that we look into that immediately, please.
Hey, Neil, before we continue the conversation, I think a couple people have their hands up, if you're willing to take comments, and then maybe we can.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that if everyone is okay with that.
Sure.
Sure.
I think we have Cheryl Levinson.
Let's leave her. I think she's.
Cheryl, can you unmute yourself?
Cheryl, can you unmute your microphone on Teams?
Probably not. There's a gentleman in the back.
So while we're trying to figure that out, there's somebody in the room who would like to speak, so maybe we'll just invite him down, and then we'll try to pick Cheryl up in a minute.
How are you all? My name's Peter Plain. I live at 16 Blodgett, and I guess that's precinct 6. I've only been here about 5 years. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to express some concerns. I'm not sure exactly, well, I haven't seen any of the documentation, but hearing about it. I think it's great that part of this conversation has been about traffic and safety and climate earlier on, and I think this proposal kind of gets to all three of them in different ways. My concerns are, you know, I think there's 15, 16 children on the street. More parking creates blind spots. There are 2 rounded corners. They're not going to yield any parking spaces. There are multiple driveways. They're not going to yield parking spaces. Two hydrants. The yield of parking spaces is just not going to be that much. There are probably 100 walkers every weekend on the street. It's great. Walkers, bicyclists. It's just going to turn a residential street into a thoroughfare. And as I said before, it's not going to really, I don't think, yield many parking spaces. It seems when you see what's going on in the area with other communities, we're encouraging traffic here when a lot of communities are just discouraging traffic. The work that was done last year was great. There are bike racks there. People can find their way to the beach, you know, if they want to. You know, there's been a lot of home renovations. I've been one of those. And with all the various workers, people encroach on driveways. They park directly behind the driveways. So now all of a sudden your depth of field when you're backing up has been cut in half. It's just, I don't think it's a conducive street to parking. And I just wanted to express that.
Which street was?
This is Blodgett.
Blodgett.
And I'm sure many of the streets in the area, they're not wide streets. I'm glad to hear parking on 2 sides isn't going to be proposed, because I don't think you can get trucks down the street if you ever had to, if people were on both sides of the street.
Chief, and before I'll get your comment in a second, but just to the comment about like the yield of parking space, like how many parking spaces we may be yielding on each of these streets, do you have estimates on that? Have you, as the traffic study advisory committee talked about that at all? Like how many spaces might be available on different streets?
We don't have a number, boy, we can certainly put one together, though. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't.
Okay.
Just a question for Sergeant Lloyd. Is there a you know, in the train station neighborhood, when that's also resident parking, correct?
That's, recreation.
Well, it's recreation parking.
Right by the train station, right?
Someone-
I'm
I
sorry,
think that's
which-
resident.
Which area are we talking about? I'm sorry.
We're right around the train station.
Oh, Pine Street.
Pine Street.
That's
Pine
right.
Street,
Middlesex.
Pine Street, Middlesex, Hampton.
Right.
Are those streets, is parking restricted on one side? Is one side resident and one side?
I'm pretty sure it's resident parking.
All
I
resident.
know Columbia on the train side that has, or both sides on Columbia has, in certain areas, has recreation. I think
I think Pine Street is all all the way down except the end where we had a discussion about adding that last section by the white building.
You talking about resident?
Resident,
Yeah, right. So what's, I'm sorry.
My question is, I just want to make sure that we're applying this resident or recreation parking fairly to the train station neighborhood as we are over here by Phillips Beach.
Right.
I just want to make sure what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I agree with that.
I may have misspoken earlier when I mentioned the train station area. I might have said recreation. It's restricted parking in that it's resident parking in that area, in the area of the train station. But
When you say resident, do you mean just residents of that area, or any resident of Swampscott can obtain a sticker to park in that area?
So when we enforce resident parking within any area, really, if you have an address and a resident parking sticker on your vehicle, and it's within that vicinity of where you reside,
Okay.
that's how we go about it. You can't have a resident parking, live on one side of the town, and then go park on the other side of town, and it's
still say have a resident.
Yeah.
You gotta have a residency, like, within that area.
Wanted to clarify. Maybe we should try Cheryl Levinson again?
She should be good.
Yep.
She looks like.
Cheryl, can you, I think we can hear you if you speak.
Why don't you, is your volume down or anything?
No, it comes through our computer on the volume.
Does it show us or being unmuted?
Yep.
Yeah.
It says mute
Yeah, her
participant.
microphone.
Yeah, so she's active. She's active.
Hey Cheryl, will you do us a favor? Do you mind logging out of the meeting and logging back into the meeting? The problem may be on your end, but maybe since I'm a tech whiz and I know Control-Alt-Delete is any solution.
Turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah, if you just log off and then log back on, let's see how that works.
All right, meantime, I think we have another comment in the room.
Hi, I'm Jared Kuchar. I also live on Blodgett Ave, 7 Blodgett, near Pete, and just wanted to reemphasize what Pete said. I myself have 2 young kids, and I do think allowing beach parking in the neighborhood is going to completely disrupt. To Pete's point, there's probably 10 to 15 kids who play in the street, they ride their bikes, they play basketball, and having beach parking is just going to be really disruptive to that neighborhood, which is, slightly set back from the main street of Shepherd, where the access to the beach. Also, too, Blodgett Ave is very narrow, so if you have one side of the street that's all cars, to Pete's point, backing up, having people come over to visit, it's just going to be really disruptive to a neighborhood that's really quiet right now and really enjoyable for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Steve Puzo. I'm on 26 Blodgett. Actually, like Pete, I just recently renovated. I've lived there for about 2 years. I moved from Shepherd. And one of the things we really liked about Blodgett is really the residential feel. My daughter has cerebral palsy, and she uses a wheelchair for mobility. So that street access and just the really, family nature of the street is hugely important to us. So when I think about what would change with beach parking is tremendous. And I would really question, if we're just using one side of the street, the number of cars that you would get for one street, and the benefit of that relative to the cost to that street, I think would be tremendous. I mean, I think, as Pete and Jared have said, if you look at our street and the width, if there is one family that has a family party on it, you can see the impact and just the narrowing of what happens on that street and the impact. So I similarly echo significant concerns and really question the value and the benefit that we would get for beach parking on one side of the street relative to what it would really do to the living condition and the nature of the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to try Plan B.
Get her on the phone?
If okay, I do. So, ooh, that's not going to work well.
Yeah.
So I need her to what?
You turn the meeting off in the background if her call.
Hey Cheryl, will you just turn your Zoom off? Log off. Stay on the phone with me though. I'm waiting for you to disappear on the screen. Yep, you're good. All right. This is amazing.
Technology.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, you're speaking to the world.
All right. Hello, world. I'm sorry about this. First of all, I have been going to the traffic study committees for the past 9 years to try and get this situation taken care of.
Hey, Cheryl, sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind just giving your full name and your address? Because there may be some people here that don't know who you are.
Sorry. Cheryl Levinson, 63 Shepherd Ave, Precinct 6.
Thank you.
And I'm the last house before the parking lot of the Beach Club. And consistently over the last 9 years, the street has become a parking lot. And the residential permit parking and the recreation permit parking signs are so much alike that people don't see the difference. And I've been trying to get this some sort of resolution for 9 years. Finally, a couple of meetings ago, it was recommended to change the color of the signs of the recreation, which I did not hear in the presentation as one of the things that they were going to do, so that people could differentiate between the two signs. Then all of a sudden, it came out with additional parking in other streets and alternating the parking on both sides, which is going to confuse everybody even more. And I just feel that, you know, when people say they pay taxes, they should park anywhere. Well, we pay taxes too. And it's nice to be able to have some place for your guests to park, especially in the summer months when they come. And having it on one side of the street seemed to work. And actually, on Shepherd, it's on both sides up to my house. It's on both sides of Shepherd and up Ocean. So, as I say, I would, you know, I hope that Chief Archer also recommends the changing of the color of the signs. But I think that alternating these signs back and forth is really going to be very, very confusing. And I agree with the Blodgett Ave issue. The Beach Club has members, most of them, more than half of them are from Marblehead, and they use Blodgett to get there. It's a very congested street in the summer. I'm done.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, I think we have one more. Jacqueline. I can't see the full name. I'm guessing it's.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I'm here, but you.
Okay. My name's Jacqueline Shanahan. I live at 37 Blodgett Ave, in Precinct 6. I did have a couple of questions before I made a comment. The chief had said that there were people that said that they felt that there was insufficient parking and that it was brought to the committee for a few years now. I'm wondering by whom?
Well, we just heard from one who's raised the concern. Cheryl Levinson told us that she's brought it to the committee for a while now. I don't have a list of other names from other residents.
Is it local neighbors to the direct area?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and you had mentioned as well that 2,957 stickers had been issued. Do you know if that's on par with the years before and after, or is that an increase?
I'm sorry, I missed you for the middle there. Is it on par with what?
Historically.
Is that number?
Yeah, I don't have a historic trend.
Okay.
Do you know that, Sean? Has it been?
I do think that there are some.
We are north of 2,000 every year.
Yeah,
I believe.
and have been.
I can't speak to 29 versus 25 or 24 or 26, but I know that we're north of 2,000, easily north of 2,000 a year, I should say, recent years.
Okay.
Okay, I'm also wondering why Atlantic isn't on the table. That's a wider road. I haven't heard, I've heard them mention residential streets. I haven't heard any discussion about the impact of those parking spaces will have residentially, but I haven't heard any talk about why we can't park on the main road for the beach.
Was that a conversation that you guys had about Atlantic, or was it?
That was never really on the table. Pretty sure you can't park on Atlantic.
Nobody can park on Atlantic.
All on it, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, just the number of spaces available at Fisherman's Beach, for example, compared to what's available at Phillips. Is there much of a difference between the two?
I mean, we haven't analyzed it, but I can just anecdotally tell you there's a lot more parking along Humphrey Street than there is on Shepherd Avenue. I don't have a comparison, like the area of the beach and the number of parking spaces.
Are there restrictions? Are there restrictions on the side streets off of Humphrey?
The restrictions on
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, like the terraces.
Like if I want to go to Fisherman's Beach and there's no parking on Humphrey, can I pull up on?
Fuller, Humphrey, Lawrence, Ingalls.
Yeah.
Those is.
I'm sure on some of those side roads there are resident parking signs. I can double check.
Yeah, okay. Jacqueline, sorry, go ahead.
I'd just be helpful to know that. Specifically for Blodgett Ave, on the non-ocean side, on my side of the street, there is a curb and a sidewalk. Mm-hmm. For the most part, on the opposite side of the street, there aren't curbs or sidewalks, at least not completely down that whole length of road. So some of it is, a lot of it is taken up by driveways. There's some muddled lines between what would be considered a driveway and what would be considered a sidewalk. And I'm sure as the chief can attest, there are multiple times where when they do come down, they take a right off Atlantic and go down Blodgett Ave. Sometimes they're blocked. People will often park right on the corners there on the inside corner on the non-beach side, which makes it impossible for large trucks to pass down, especially if there's something on the other side of the street. And that is more of an, anecdotally, is more of an issue in the summer than it is in the winter because of the additional parking. And people don't use their common sense and will park on both sides of the street, which makes the street impassable. And I myself have 3 kids, one of which is out there constantly, and there's already speeding, as one of the neighbors had attested to, from Marblehead straight down to the Beach Club. There's a lot of speeding on that road in the summertime. There's a lot of use of that street by people walking their dogs, and I'm sure as you all have experienced, they often walk in the middle of the road. So I do think that in general it will change the nature of my street in particular. I can't speak to the other streets in general. And I do oppose this suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's one more, Joel Sapp, and then I think we'll move on to a conversation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Sapp. I'm on 90 Blodgett Ave, and I think there's been a lot of Blodgetters. So I can speak for a couple other streets there as well. I heard Charles mention, and honestly, I think it would be helpful if the town actually measured the width of some of these streets, because I don't even think currently parking on that street is that safe. For one, at night, there's not any lights at the top and the bottom of the street, and when people do park, even though they're not supposed to, I guess, during beach times, it's really easy to not see, cars that should be on that, that are parked on that street. As well, I think what Cheryl mentioned about people parking on both sides of the street already along Shepherd, and I'm not sure who was speaking initially, people are parking already on Shepherd and on Ocean all the way up past, past Atlantic, I guess, already. But when people start parking on both sides of the street, which happens already, it is very narrow, and I don't think it is safe. We too have 2 kids. I think there's a lot of kids on the street, and then the rest are really a lot of elderly folks as well. At least on Cutting and on Charles and on Blodgett, that's something that I see a lot of walking. And if we're, it's kind of interesting. We started off talking about planting more trees and being sort of sustainable there. If we've already given out 2,900 parking passes for a town that's fairly small, I don't know. I feel like maybe there should be more walking if we need to be allowing even more people to park in all these areas. But either way, I don't really, I oppose this consideration, at least at the moment. I think we need to make sure that some of these smaller streets can actually handle the parking, and then maybe even if they can, if it's 3 cars and it blocks, only 3 cars can park on that street, and then it blocks the rest. I'm not sure that's very helpful either. So I definitely think there should be some consideration for Charles and maybe Cutting, I think, too, is fairly narrow, but there's a couple streets that don't really seem like to be making a lot of great sense, I guess, to be parking on those streets.
Okay, thank you, Joel.
No, I just have a quick comment.
Yep.
And a question for the chief. So my comment is, I think there's been some great conversations and certainly some concerns from the Blodgett neighbors and those on Shepherd Ave. But quite, just to be blunt, not everyone lives in walking distance of Phillips Beach. I don't. Do you?
I do not.
So I think to have this as an open recreation area, I think there has to be accommodations for those who cannot walk or cannot bike. So my next question is to you, Chief Archer. Is the parking that is going to be created on one side of the street in this neighborhood, can a fire truck still get through? Are we creating a public safety hazard by doing this, or is this something that is indeed safe?
Sure, and I appreciate all the feedback from the neighbors and all of you guys that came. I really do. Nobody knows the streets as well as people that live there. They have a really good sense. They see trucks, they see UPS trucks, they see Amazon trucks. They've seen it with lots of cars parking. They've seen it with few cars parking. So I think it's really helpful to get feedback from all of them. And we can certainly drill down more on, how much do we need and which streets are most, appropriate to add it. There certainly can be areas, even as we contemplated it, I guess, we sort of summarized, parking on this street, that street, that street. Anywhere we expanded parking, there would be exceptions. We're not suddenly saying you can park in front of driveways or you can park in front of fire hydrants or on corners. So that would be, and there certainly could be some of these roads where the number of exceptions to the parking would make it such that it might be pointless to even explore that road. So to answer your question, David, I don't have an answer. I can't go down this list street by street and tell you where there are. The obstructions to fire trucks aren't as common as people think. They're not as big as people think they are. They're normal trucks. They can go pretty much anywhere your UPS truck can go. But there can certainly be areas where a given set of circumstances cause an obstruction. There are streets in town where there are regularly issues, with the nature of the width of the street and the nature of who's parking there and what's being parked there. where we know there are trouble spots that crop up all the time. We certainly don't want to create any more of them. So very much willing to take a closer look at that, and drill down on exactly how much additional park. I mean, the one thing I feel is that it's kind of difficult to dispute is there is a need for additional parking to get to Phillips Beach, or else we're just going to have to just keep ticketing people because there just is not enough. There's not enough parking given the size of that beach. There's not enough places that we make it for people to park. And to your point, David, you're right. It's not a very walkable. It's not a very walkable amenity. There are some people that can walk there, but for the most part, if we want people to be able to enjoy the beach, we need to accommodate them, and I understand we need to also be respectful of the neighborhoods and try to minimize the impact on them. So that's my long answer to your question. It's street by street and area by area of the street, and we can certainly take a look and see if there are places where it's just the cost-benefit analysis doesn't lend itself to adding parking.
I have a follow-up question too in that regard. I am a frequenter of Phillips Beach. We go there all the time, and the amount of time that I attend, I don't ever see the beach club parking full, ever. So have we had conversation at all with the beach club about utilizing some of their parking, which is going not parked in, to house some of our folks who have a right to be at the beach just as much as those guys have a right to be at the beach club? Have we had any conversation about accessing some of their parking?
We have not.
So, but, I will say historically, there have been cleanup efforts, typically around Earth Day, and early in the season, where if you go and you clean up, you will get a pass for that lot. It's restricted on a number of days, and if there are any extras, then that is available for purchase as well. So there are options there, with some elbow grease and some people power, certainly.
So I wanted to start by saying I think it's great you guys are having this conversation. This has been, Chief, you just said one person, but all of us have heard from plenty more than one person about this situation. I do think the fire truck is an interesting conversation, but it's an interesting conversation for every single street in Swampscott, right? I think someone you have to mute, please. I think it's Jacqueline. Thank you. If parking's allowed on both sides already, then that shouldn't be an issue, arguably, right? But again, a couple of us live in the Olmsted neighborhood, and parking's allowed on every side. And if there was a third side, it would be allowed on the third side. And so the same fire engine concerns are there as well, right? So we trust that on all of our parking regulations, if there's any street in Swampscott that currently allows parking on both sides, one side, no side that you can't get through, that you have some contacts with the traffic committee, you probably can get it changed. So, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not waiting on that. I do think, I come from a philosophy that I believe as though not only should everybody in town be able to use our natural resources, but I do not believe being a Swampscott resident is a prerequisite to you using the natural resources of our coast. I think, frankly, and I appreciate our town administrator's focus on this in the past, I believe it's needlessly exclusive, and I don't think that's necessary. And frankly, I think our restaurants would benefit from, our businesses would benefit from, and I think, frankly, our community benefits from having visitors. So I appreciate that we're looking at this, and I want you to keep looking at it. I think the comments about understanding what supply will be generated from these streets is a really good one, right? Taking in consideration minimum distance from driveways and intersections. What are you guys going to create as a standard that you want to make sure is kept? How are we going to delineate that, right? How do you really enforce that? I know on Shepherd, for example, where there is the resident-only parking, that was in part trying to do it because people were just snuggling up to driveways, right, making it very difficult to back out and have view corridors. And the comments about blind spots are spot on. right? Blind spots, it's not about the beach parking, it's about anywhere, right? We've talked about crosswalks in town, we've talked about intersections. So let's go through that analysis, and I think staff can help you and then graphically show it out, right? Thanks to GIS, we have so many mapping tools now that we can really use that and show out if we took 15 feet from every driveway. I'm just making up numbers. I don't know what the right number is going to be. And we took 20 feet from every intersection, and we took 20 feet from every crosswalk, and we kept a clear hydrant to the extent, I don't know what the distances are. What is left, I think it's just important just to know, right? So that we're not creating illusory parking, because if it's illusory, then we're not solving anything. We're doing something without solving anything. And I think, so let's just figure out what it is that actually creates. And then the alternating sides, I'll be honest with you, I actually think it's a great idea. Other communities do it, and they do it with snow parking, for example. More often than not, you see it with snow parking, right? Which is when they allow parking on the street on odd number of years. During a snow emergency, you have to park on the odd side, and even number of years, the even side, just because they need one side clear for snow removal. So I think that's a really creative idea and worthy of continuing to explore so that people share the burden of that. But I do think, let's go through, before the conversation goes too much further here, let's go through the analysis just to understand what we would be gaining through this, just to be able to quantify that. Because if we can show that it's worth doing, meaning that we're getting meaningful number of spaces or whatever the number is that's worth doing, but we can also do it in a way that we are able to mark the streets. Now, if streets don't have curbs, maybe it's harder, right? If they all had curbs, maybe it's easier because we can paint curbs, we can create non-parking zones. Just how you suggest we do that to make it so that enforcement's only secondary to when they didn't follow the rules to begin with. So how do we make it as foolproof as we can that they'll follow the rules? Understanding us humans like to not follow rules. But let's come back with a kind of comprehensive vision on that to see what's possible. I am open to the fact that there should be, again, on Humphrey Street, on Fisherman's parking lot and train station, I mean, I holistically feel the way I do about the fact that, I don't think this should be a Swampscott only right. I think our beaches are not, they're for everyone, and I want everyone. I do appreciate in past years, during COVID in particular, we made a yeoman's attempt at having public parking at Fisherman's and allowing people to come and pay for a day pass instead of having that be recreation parking. I think even having Phillips Park, it wasn't Fisherman's, I apologize, it was Phillips Park for Iceman's Beach. I think even having that parking lot be recreation stickers only also says to people that want to use the fields and whatnot, you either have to have a sticker or you got to be from Swampscott, and I just think that's the wrong message again. Yep. I don't think that's the intended message, but that certainly is the implication of it happening. So I think this is worthwhile, and I really do. You are taking on a tough topic, and the neighbors have their comments are spot on. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that there isn't a good way of doing it. It just means that let's go down the path a little bit more, do that homework, and then come back and have that conversation and say, can we deal with sight lines? Can we, on some streets where there isn't curbing or some streets that don't have a width of some sort, just to, again, appreciate that you guys are working on this and just ask for that homework, because I do think it's an important conversation and I would love for it to come back, and I agree with David Grishman's feelings and about this.
Yeah, I would just like to say I agree with Peter's comment. Not all streets are the same, and for instance, my street, I don't have a driveway. So if you park in front of my house, you're parking in my driveway, and the neighborhood knows that. But if I had a beach at the end of my street, the people going to the beach wouldn't necessarily know that, and that would be aggravating for me every week to have to deal with. So I can fully sympathize with what all of the citizens have said with regards to these surrounding streets. It has to be balanced with some critical, logical thinking about where the best increase in parking will be, and to get folks not just from the other side of town, but from other towns to join us as well, as Peter stated. So I agree that we should be exploring this. I'm glad we are exploring this, and this should just be the beginning of the discussion into exploring how we can expand the parking in the area without being detrimental to some of these streets, which are more unique than others.
I fully agree with Peter and Katie. Don't need to add anything. I think, no, I will add something. I think part of that homework and extra work, I think it's obvious, but I think is is working with the folks that are here who commented from the neighborhood, but also the other streets who aren't represented and getting those insights and talking to them, as well as just walking the neighborhood and figuring out, you know, how to be tactical about it. So I think that's.
Yeah, Neil, I think that's a really good recommendation. I do think, even working with the Stanley School neighborhood, meeting in the neighborhood, talking to the neighbors, hearing the stories about the individual concerns, about your children, your safety, really, I think, is important. Look, it's a beautiful town, and it's a wonderful neighborhood, and it's our hope that we can always maintain safety, and we can always work with, neighborhoods to really help celebrate everything that everybody loves about Swampscott. My concern really is, accessibility, safety. How many, handicap parking spots do we have? How many should we have? We have a community that is getting older and older. We're living longer and longer. It's not bad news, but we need to have more accessibility, and we need to work with neighborhoods to try to help ensure that we have more handicap parking spaces. That's going to put a little more pressure on other places. So let's study this. Let's work with these neighborhoods and see where we can help make adjustments that will keep everybody safe, but help make Swampscott that much more inclusive. It's worth thinking about whether or not we actually need beach parking stickers. That's a conversation that we should advance as well. Maybe there's a better way for us to address some of these responsibilities. I like the conversation about the beach club too. We should reach out to them as part of these efforts.
So the only thing, I'm sorry, I didn't write down, so I didn't say it. Bike racks. The new design at Phillips is great. It has some bike racks, and they're definitely better looking than the bike circles there, but our actual number of bike rack count is actually down from what used to be there. And I'm not asking us just to, let's do it consistent with the design, and let's do it thoughtfully as opposed to just dropping bike racks there. But if you want people to be biking, let's give them the means of a place to lock their bikes and feel safe about that as well. So it's something to be thinking about.
All right, so as for next steps here, I mean, what happens next?
I'd like the Traffic Safety Committee to schedule several meetings, perhaps one in person in the neighborhood, one online, take input and feedback from the neighborhoods, evaluate the select board's concerns, and reach out to the beach club and see where we can actually quantify the number of spaces. We're going to have to go down and evaluate each of these streets and really get a sense of the number of spaces that we're going to, be able to enhance the area by, and then we can circle back around with the board.
Okay, because it is beach season is rapidly approaching 2.5 months.
I'm aware of that.
Looking forward to it too.
We all are.
That sound like a plan,
Sounds like a
Sergeant
plan.
Lloyd and Chief Archer?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the feedback.
Really appreciate your work on this, and certainly we'll follow up as we get some feedback from the neighborhood. Just want to thank the neighbors that showed up today, and thank you for your thoughtful comments.
Yep, thank you.
Right on cue. All right. Moving on, I think, to discussion of fiscal year 24 operating budget. So I know Amy's not here and not joining, so Sean, I wanted to get a sense from you of how far you expect this discussion to go tonight, or
Amy's not here.
Can I just see for a second? We know that there's some residents here for an entertainment license or to comment on an entertainment license in our consent agenda. Would you mind if we just do?
Want to jump to that?
We can jump to that, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're just going to talk about the entertainment license for Dockside.
Do we need to vote to take it out of the consent agenda, or?
You can just pull it out.
Okay.
We can if you want to.
No, I just wanna,
Okay.
I just don't want Bill Demento to call tomorrow.
He'll call anyways,
No.
if the phone lines in Florida are working.
So, Mary Ellen, I think you had specific comments or concerns or questions about this that you wanted to talk about.
Yes, so on the entertainment license, this license is requesting to go until 1 AM. The previous license went from Zest Friends, went to 10, I think. Yep, it went to 10. So I did support the liquor license until 1 because Zest Friends was until 1, and now I'm also thinking of staying in line with that. Zest Friends entertainment license went until 10, and this one is a request till 1 AM. If you look at other entertainment licenses, Diane was nice enough to bring us a copy. If you look at entertainment licenses on Humphrey Street, you have Cafe Avellino, goes to 11. And G and Little G aren't even listed as having an entertainment license. And then the only other entertainment license, well, I would say Lord Haven, but that's further down, so that, I don't know if that would really play into it, but that goes until 11. So I'm more inclined of saying I really think that license should be closer to 10 or 11 and not 1.
So Mary Ellen, are you stating that, that there should be no TV monitors or board games?
No, so well, the next question I have is on an entertainment license, can it be split out, so that,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think,
what?
Yeah, I know, you're asking.
no, it's,
Because I looked at the application, and it doesn't show an area to split it out.
the live music, I think I would agree. We probably should not have live music running until 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
They're not even asking for live music, though.
Well, karaoke.
Okay.
We just agree that's a bad idea to begin with. I mean, should we save people the embarrassment?
Fair.
Disc jockey, that's not live music, but that's, so, yeah, so of course, board games, I don't have an issue with.
Yeah.
Sure, but I don't know if we can split this out.
Or I just can't even, so can you explain to us, maybe?
I can. I've actually asked these
want to-
questions
to
previously.
Mary Ellen's point, like,
It's a
how
past
do we
practice.
delineate, like, I mean, but is it in a bylaw? Is it in a charter? Is
Yeah.
it in a statute that somehow we're like, I mean,
I think
again.
it's a past practice of just delineating, all of the specific activities that you're going to allow. It's part of your regulatory, licensing.
I got that. So does that mean, in your view, and I know you'll probably confirm this to make sure, but that we can, for example, at some point, I think we have to acknowledge that if someone has the ability to operate as a restaurant, certain things this day and age sadly go with a restaurant, and that oftentimes is TVs. I'm just using that as an example. It's something such that we're not then putting another layer of decision-making on something that a bylaw or a board already basically inherently said, yes. Can we agree that board games go with every use? Every use, you should be able to play board games.
I would think if somebody wanted to bring a board game in and say, hey, it's.
But I think that things that we're talking about here are things that will emanate sounds.
I'm talking about
predictably beyond
music.
Yes,
I'm talking about music.
Right, and so I think so we absolutely should delineate this better, because this is.
But you've actually delineated instruments, like you.
No. In actual permits we have.
That's right.
But I'm not saying that was good practice. Except banning the tuba after 7 p.m. was brilliant, I think, by the town. So, but let's.
It's an interesting level of detail that, you and prior boards have gotten into. I think I can go back to town council and get a sense of what is the regulatory parameters that you really have to operate within. it's, I'm sure it's based on some level of case law and some exceedance. You know, there's probably communities where, you know, they didn't want to see any type of activity in certain establishments, and they encroached upon it, and they've decided to be a little bit more explicit about regulating, you know, the specific activities. And TVs or, you know, television screens, you know, they were a draw maybe 50 years ago, and they probably appeared in a lot of permits. They're not that interesting anymore, and it may have just become, you know, a legacy type of.
I mean, I do think it's tricky because it's, you know, you think like, oh, TVs, but I mean, this is a pub. If there's a big game on Friday night, it's on the West Coast. A lot of people are going there to watch the game. That can be loud.
Right.
And it's all they're doing is they have TVs on.
No, I understand, but then, I understand that, but then we're, whatever. It's such a great debate because I don't actually know the answer to the debate, but I just struggle. Ignore this fact pattern because this fact pattern's a, you know, a neighborhood-specific fact pattern. So let's put that license aside. We're talking generically, or I'm talking generically anyways, which is this idea, which is to have a regulatory authority in our town that says this use is allowed, to go through a liquor license if it's a liquor establishment and have this is allowed, and to go to the zoning board if you have to go to the zoning board and say this is allowed. But then to be able to say, but the last layer is the thing that will actually make you successful, right? Meaning if you're a sports bar and everything in our zoning bylaw says you can do it, and I'm not talking about time, I'm talking about just the function itself. Right. You know, would we really allow a sports bar into zoning, or going to the zoning board or the planning board, or, you know, all these other licenses, liquor license, but then turn around and say, but we don't want to have TVs. You know, we wouldn't say that, right? I know that was what I'm saying, but the point is, it just, at some point, it's like.
It doesn't make sense, yeah.
You know, how many bites of the apple do we need as a
Shouldn't
town?
it be
now,
assumed
on this, I agree with Mary Ellen about scaling back 1 a.m. So, I mean, like, I do agree on the time issue. The time issue is a secondary, like a separate topic for me, but we should work on carving this up more, because I have no problem with them having a TV on until 1 o'clock. And when I think TV, I'm thinking normal TV, and I don't begrudge them being successful. So I also don't want to say, oh, but if it's a nationally ranked game, you can't play, but you only can play like Division III football. So I mean, like, but I want to differentiate those things because I don't want to handcuff the businesses from being successful.
Yeah,
we've made policy decisions. We being the town meeting before us and years past have made decisions, and they're still on the books.
So do you want me to follow back up with town council and bring this up at the next meeting?
Well, I think so. Just yes, but I would ask you to differentiate the town council's answer. Because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something, right? So discern, what do we have to do? What do we have to regulate under state law, which has to come before us, and we can't waive that, versus what we don't have to. We can if we want to, but we don't have to. And I just want to know that difference, because that's a big difference here. And I think
I guess my concern is, you know, if we don't specify it, is it allowed? Is it allowed, or does it have to be specified to be allowed? Like, where's the?
No, but
I know.
No, I got it. But if we're talking about the sale of alcohol, do we care about bottled beer versus draft beer? I mean, I'm getting to the point of ridiculous, which is there's so many details about every business, right? If we're not regulating TVs, we're not regulating TVs. So you don't actually need to say it. If the zoning bylaw says a restaurant under 2,000 square feet is allowed by right in this district, and the only reason you need to go to the zoning board is because of your liquor license, great. You don't have, no one's asking you questions about your TV there. You go to the zoning board. The zoning board, when they're talking about whether or not you should sell liquor, want to talk about whether or not you have TVs. I guess they can, and they can decide whether or not they want to condition their special permit on something like that.
Are they going to the zoning board for something?
I don't think they are.
Why did I think I read that they had to go to the zoning board for something?
For their window, for the takeout window.
Okay, that's it. Very good, David.
And for the refrigerator that they want to build out next to on the east side.
Yes, that would be a dimensional.
2.5 feet from the property line of the grinds.
So.
And using.
Here, let's give you a microphone just so people can hear it at home.
And using, they said that Seth's friends used this area of storage where they want to store their kegs next to this built-out refrigerator that's less than a few feet from my kitchen door. And, yeah, so I think they're going again to the planning board, which may.
The zoning board?
Which may be recommended to the zoning, if I understood the meeting notes from the other night.
Goes to the planning board first?
So if it goes to the zoning board, there's certain petitions, and I don't know what they're doing here, so I can't speak because of this. Certain petitions that don't, years ago, in '09, when we rewrote the zoning bylaw, we made it so you didn't have to go to two boards on the same topic. And so what happens though is in certain instances, if you are going to the zoning board, the planning board has a right to review the petition and make a recommendation to the zoning board, but they don't actually take a formal vote or anything of that nature. So, but this raises another thing, which is we just voted on a liquor license, but if did the liquor license, and again, I don't remember even seeing a premises plan, if they're changing where they're storing alcohol, that's different than Zest Friends was storing alcohol, and that's technically a different premises.
Yep.
I mean, so it feels like we're kind of getting this, I want them to be hugely successful, and I want them to open as quickly as they can be open, right? Let's be clear. But it feels like we're kind of doing this in parts, and it feels like we're doing it backwards. So I guess I would just ask that someone figure this out. Someone, not me.
Please.
Okay. It feels like we don't even know what, I don't think we heard about the outdoor refrigeration thing. And stuff like that. And again, not that it would have changed anything, but we.
New to me.
We should have premises plans.
Well, it might not change anything with their business either. I mean.
It might not, right? So,
because they're going to, my understanding is they're going to the zoning board for their takeout window.
I think you're right. The thought, they're moving forward with this enterprise with or without the window, but they've identified the window as a feature that they would like to have, and so that's part of it.
But it sounds like they might also be going to the zoning board because they're building some type of thing that would be a structure and have to get dimensional relief or something of that nature. I mean, and again, I'm speculating based on just.
I'll get more information. I don't know enough about that.
Yeah. So
I'll look into it.
It's just helpful.
So,
knowing that stuff is going to help us be able to relax on things that we don't need to worry about, right? You know what I mean? Like, just generally speaking, create better policies, frankly, and say, oh, we don't care about TVs.
Agreed.
We don't care about board games. But until you figure this out, I care about board
I will
games.
figure this out.
All about board games.
Yes.
Yeah, like, are they playing Scrabble,
Or Cheesy Champion.
what are we playing?
I am a big fan of board games.
So what is that, because here's I supported 1 AM on the liquor license because there was a business there, 1 AM on a liquor license. That business also had 10 o'clock entertainment. So where does that leave us now? Because, we have neighbors who purchased the property prior to that zoning changing. So that hardship.
I'm sorry, that last part, not to debate it.
Yeah.
That restaurants have been allowed at this property going back 20 some odd years. So I don't know what year. I hear you. I'm not.
Sold that in the.
I hear you. I'm sorry. I'm not intending to debate. So, in 2009, when I rewrote the zoning bylaw with the zoning bylaw rewrite committee, those restaurants had already been allowed there. The overlay district did some dimensional changes to make things. That was in 2015, 16, I think. Made some dimensional changes and depending on things, but use-wise, restaurants going back even before '09, restaurants needed a special permit from the zoning board. In '09, restaurants under a certain size no longer needed a special permit unless they had a carryout window or they had the sale of alcohol. So those are the things, just so you know, actually the chronology there. It doesn't negate the fact that a neighbor's still next to a commercial district and has concerns. I just want you to know the chronology is restaurants have been allowed, albeit by special permit, for a very long time in this area.
Okay, so my issue, and I think I'm probably share the same issue with everyone on this board, is I want a business to be successful, and I want neighbors to be content. So I just want to figure out how we get there.
So I have a procedural question. Can we amend their application, or we just reject it and ask them to come back based on this conversation?
We can vote whatever we want.
Yeah.
They're just, they're just asking for something.
Okay.
We can do
give
to
them.
10, we can do to 11.
Yep.
So we can
Just
do
want to
that,
make
yes.
sure.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
So then I think we should move our discussion towards if it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock.
I would agree.
Because I think most of us are in agreement it's not till 1 o'clock. unless I'm misreading the room.
Yeah, except for the little nuance of TVs, right? Because I'm not looking to have establishments turn off their TVs because it's 10 o'clock. I mean, that's just.
Sure.
So.
That's, yeah, that's fair.
So I'm personally comfortable with 11 o'clock for everything, but after 11 o'clock, music
Just board
is
games and
what-
TVs.
Yeah, board games and TVs are allowed, the rest is not.
Would it make more sense for me to go back, take a look at the regulatory parameters that the board has for entertainment and the specificity, talk to town council, and then
If I'm hearing Katie correctly, and I
Why?
think she's right, which is we want to help
Just
move
move
things
them forward in the process and we can.
But do it in a responsible way. So I think,
Right.
I appreciate Katie's suggestion that we can still take action tonight.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
So I would say that what I would like to propose is for all of the entertainment requested, the cutoff be 11 p.m. And for the board games and TV, they can keep it on till 1, till close. So, and I feel like I understand that Zest Friends only had it till 10, so there is a sense to keep the consistency. However, if we're looking at Mission on the Bay has it till midnight, New Haven
Right.
has it till 11. If you're looking on that street, both of those are in residential areas, albeit not as close to neighbors. But I think the sound travels regardless if you're in somebody's backyard or on that street. It bounces in all sorts of directions. I occasionally hear Mission all the way on Banks Terrace, so I think 11 is a reasonable hour for the permit.
I'll second that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, just in terms of further discussion, I don't recall Zest Friends when they applied for their entertainment license, but they may have only wanted it until 10. So like, I don't know that we restricted it, but I don't know, I don't have
Yeah,
a
they
recall to know.
That's actually
know
what
that.
their application, when they filled out their application, it was 10.
Yeah.
It was
Right,
10, and
so I think that,
they might not have
it's
wanted
a
to stay
hard
up past
comparison because there's not necessarily precedent there that we restricted an application in the prior. But so, just so I'm clear, the motion is 11 p.m. for everything other than TVs and board games, which are allowed until 1.
That's correct. That's the motion I presented.
I seconded it.
TVs and widescreen and board
I
games.
don't, Sean, I don't care what you do, but please make us never have to use the word board games as a select board.
I got you.
Okay?
I got you.
Unless we're talking about the Scrabble tournament, which I'm proposing.
We're going
Yeah.
on hour
My
3.
select board.
Monopoly Monday.
Scrabble,
Peter's house.
Scrabble
We
time.
have a
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of Katie's motion?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I also, by the way, this I think was great. Thank you, Diane, for and Mary Ellen asking for it. But I think
Yes.
frankly, with every one of our applications, we should have for liquor licenses and entertainment. Give us this as a reminder of what we've already done for the dozens of other places that have these things so that we can understand consistency and things of that nature, because none of us remember. So this is very helpful.
Agreed.
Okay. Now, budget.
All right. So I think the most significant development with the budget really has to do with, I think, a tentative agreement that I have been able to reach with the superintendent and the Swampscott Public Schools. We had a variance with the level of funding that I had originally established for the Swampscott Public School System. School committee had supported a budget that was higher than what I had originally established. We have been working hard over the last few years to constrain costs, and I just want to be clear that, with inflation, with a lot of pressure and complexities with the pandemic, certainly, the Swampscott Public School System has felt the same type of constraints as every other department in town. They have many more complexities in terms of their service responsibilities, but certainly every household has faced those same challenges. So when we built this budget, we We're intent on building a budget that would increase no more than 2% plus new growth, which is essentially 2.59%. This past Friday, I met with the superintendent and the school finance director, Cheryl Herrick-Steller, and Amy Sauer, our director of finance administration, and went over agreement that really has 5 parts. The town will I agreed to add $130,000 in technology for the school department into the capital plan. This consists of $100,000 for electronic boards, which have a useful life of 10 years, and $30,000 for a STEM lab, which has a useful life of 7 years. The school department did agree that they will pursue grants for these projects and help avoid the utilization of that $130,000, but certainly I think this keeps faith with our position that we did not want to include laptops and technology that had a useful life of less than 5 years in the capital plan. Our rating agencies had given us, some warnings, and our bond counsel gave us warning that that wouldn't be acceptable as we went out to market. We also agreed that at the annual town meeting in May of this year, we would establish a special education stabilization fund. Over the last 5 years, I've advocated that we establish a special education stabilization fund. These costs do grow at a higher percentage at times, and they are oftentimes different one year to another. They're based on census of the school department students, and certainly we have a statutory obligation to address the educational needs of these students. It just can be very disruptive to stabilizing a operating budget, and certainly we want to have that stability because ultimately we want to have a stable tax levy. So we agreed that we would establish a stabilization fund at a level of $310,000 to reflect unforeseen increases in out-of-district tuition and over 14% increase in special education cost. Future funding will include Medicaid reimbursements. The school department had stopped applying for Medicaid over the last few years. It has been a significant loss of revenue to the town's general fund. And so I think this was a significant concession by the school department to fill out, some of the very arduous Medicaid reimbursement forms. We also agreed that additional Chapter 78 that would appear in the FY24 budget would be used to offset the actual increase in health insurance for the school employees. As I had presented 2 weeks ago when we presented the budget, we have budgeted a health insurance line item in the town budget that increases by 2.6%, but we're absolutely facing increases in that health insurance line of upwards of 5, 6, maybe 8%, and so we know that we're going to need to use some of the additional local aid or Chapter 70 aid to offset those proposed increases. The superintendent was clear that this agreement is for FY24 only. We did talk about the millionaire's tax and the potential that there may be a windfall of additional revenue for Chapter 70 or educational assistance. I certainly am open to discussions about additional revenue, but what's most important is that we don't build one-time revenues into our operating budget. And so what I had stressed with the superintendent and the finance team was, look, if we do get one-time revenues, let's ensure that we're using them to offset utilities that may rise higher than 2%. Let's use them to offset fuel or other expenses that just may rise higher, like unemployment expenses. Sometimes we have the opportunity to negotiate some things, and And these can have significant impacts to the operating budget, and we want to make sure that we have non-general fund stabilization funds, because those stabilization funds are not just for the operating budget, they're for our tax levy. And as I've mentioned a number of times, that's ultimately what we're trying to stabilize. We're trying to stabilize the impact that this budget has on taxpayers and homeowners in Swampscott. We also agreed that we will get back to meeting weekly, and we will refine the process for how we're going to set up policies for this educational stabilization fund, clearly define the roles of the town administrator, superintendent, school committee, select board, and finance committee prior to the annual town meeting. These are best practice policies. They're in place in numerous municipalities across the Commonwealth, and we want to come up with something that really doesn't make it overly onerous to really address the educational responsibilities that we have and we share to meet statutory responsibilities. I do want to thank Mary Ellen. Certainly want to thank Superintendent Angelakis and Cheryl Herrick-Steller and Amy Sorrow. Look, we have to work through these issues. I do appreciate how complex and how difficult it is to budget for the educational needs of our students. They are the larger department in a town budget, but we have many departments. They all are facing complexities. These critical, discussions ultimately, I think, will help us address future needs. We've got a middle school that needs millions of dollars worth of capital investments. We have other school department priorities that need millions of dollars worth of capital investments, and having stability with an operating budget and having this discipline will continue to allow Swampscott to continue to balance the future needs. I've talked a few times about the importance of having, a senior center that has some assisted health care programs for residents of Swampscott that have dementia. We're starting that program. It's going to be expensive. There's no easy way to provide those services, but we have to provide those services. We have families that need those services, and the only way we're going to be able to afford to do that is to tighten up budgets and have difficult conversations with any number of the priorities that we have. That said, I think this does reflect, esprit de corps. I think it reflects the same partnership that we've had with the school department over the last 5 years that has allowed us to accomplish so much. Prior to about 6 years ago, it was not uncommon for the town to pass budgets that increased certain line items by 5 or 6%. It put us in a position where, we were very close to our levy capacity under Proposition 2.5. And so it shouldn't be lost on us how easy it would be to go back to that. We have communities across the Commonwealth looking for Proposition 2.5 overrides. And, it looks like that might be a path of, least resistance for a lot of folks. But, Swampscott does have one of the higher average single-family tax bills in the Commonwealth. And folks do struggle. I've mentioned a number of times there's not a week that goes by that doesn't somebody does not come into my office and say, do you have a more affordable place where I can, move to? Do you have an affordable unit yet? Have you built an affordable unit? Last week I had a couple that came in and they were really, eager to find a more affordable place to stay in a town that they love, but they were having a hard time paying, the tax bill. And that's after years of trying to make this town more affordable. It's still expensive, and we've got to try to continue to find a way to balance all these priorities. With that, certainly want to get the board's thoughts about that. The Finance Committee is meeting on Monday, and they have asked, or the superintendent and the finance team has asked to see if we can coordinate a meeting, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the School Committee, and really outline a shared conversation about how we move forward. Certainly understand that, our meeting schedule is demanding, but certainly wanted to throw it out to the board and get your thoughts.
Sean, no, I think just on the surface here, I mean, this looks like a great compromise and a way of resolving this issue. And I think it goes to show, what can be accomplished when sides sit together and have conversations and build that trust and work together rather than, call each other out publicly. So I think this is great. So Mary Ellen, thank you. Sean, Cheryl, school committee members as well, the superintendent. One question was, what are electronic boards?
Smart boards? They're like smart boards. They're,
got it.
Yeah,
got
so
it.
the reason why we took them out of the capital plan is, they didn't put them into technology. They thought all technology should be removed. So there's just a communication issue right there, because that's not a computer. They were asked really to take computers out of their budget, and that was about $180,000 prior to COVID. What they have here is $130,000 in their budget that had shelf life of, one was 7 years, one was 10 years. So that really qualifies to be in capital, so we put it over into capital.
Okay.
But, that's really the thing. But I really agree with you. I'm going to be honest, when I listened to the school committee comments, it was disheartening to me. Just to listen, I think maybe it was the tone that kind of got to me. And I did have a chance to sit down with the business manager, Cheryl Stella, and Pam Angelakis, and because I've been on the finance committee, I had a couple ideas that we could just all work out, and it was the easiest little conversation between the four of us, and we got it going. So, and I really believe that Superintendent Angelakis and business manager Cheryl Stella are going to work very, very hard to look at their budget and to work with Sean.
Good.
So.
And Sean, just a follow-up question. Is there anyone on staff with, within the school department who's a grant writer, who is seeking out these grants? There
Yes,
is.
so the, I forget the name of the woman who runs the technology department. Do you? LaTanya. She's constantly looking for grants and getting grants. And according to Cheryl Stella, that she's going to be working on those grants right now. She's looking for grants so that, we might not have to use that money, so.
The school department has a lot of grant writers. They do get quite a few grants.
Yeah.
So, I do have confidence that, they'll be able to put some grants in. It's just hard to say who's going to get awarded,
No,
So we have
understood. I
effort.
just wanted to make sure that was something that was being looked at, not only on the school side, but on the town side as well.
We have some pretty successful grant writers on the town side as well, so.
And they're going to apply for Medicaid reimbursement again, and, the proposal is apply for the Medicaid reimbursement, and then that money should flow directly into the special education reserve. So the efforts go directly into that, so.
Into that revolver.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So I just have a couple of comments. I echo the gratitude to all the partners for coming together and putting this together. Of all the things on this sheet of paper that causes me pause, it's number 5, only because most of these things are very clearly defined and very specific in detail, so expectations can be managed. The only one that isn't would be to define the details in the process of the stabilization fund, which is a future task to be accomplished. So I just hope that that communication is as clearly defined as the rest of these bullet points, so that
that's
it's
just,
clear.
Again, there are a number of best practices that we're going to look at. Language about if we put money in a stabilization account, how do we authorize expenditures? What do we need to see?
Yeah.
What should we see? There's quite a bit of detail there, and so the question is, what are we going to be comfortable with
Correct.
as a board, as a finance committee, as a school committee?
I just want it to be detailed so that the schools have a clear understanding of how they obtain the money, what they need to provide, what they need to spend first, all that kind of thing, so that they're clear and their expectations are managed on how they're going to be able to spend that funding in the future.
That's all.
So my comment was exactly along the same lines as Katie. I just want to make sure, so this year we're going to fund 310 of free cash. We still need to have a big free cash and stabilization discussion because we're going into not uncharted, but recently uncharted waters for us on free cash. But putting that aside, I assume in fiscal year 24, then we aren't touching that stabilization, that we are funding 310, and 310 will be there for us to deal with for future budgets. Or are we tapping into the 310 immediately? In which case it's not stabilization.
No, so by moving the 310 from free cash into a stabilization, it still comes underneath our guidelines for our bottom line guidelines as far as stabilization accounts and
If we don't use
free
any
cash,
other free cash.
as long as we don't
or
use
anything
it. And so then what they have to do is they have to work out the wording as far as how they're gonna go about using their other accounts
Which gets-
first before they
How
tap
does it
in.
get drawn?
So
How
I
do they
guess-
draw down?
How do they
their-
draw
their
down?
Circuit
My
breaker.
only question is my statement correct that none of the 310 is going to be used to balance the fiscal year 24 budget?
That's
Correct.
correct. It's not my
Correct.
expectation that
No.
this is going to artificially plug the budget.
Mhm.
You know, they have, I would say they have, you know, some special education circuit breaker funding, and, you know, they're.
But however they do it, right? The point is, however they do it, that's fine. My question literally was just about, I wanted to make sure we were truly fully funding a stabilization account at 310 that would be there for future gaps.
Correct, I just want to reiterate why we came up with 310. 310 was the 14% increase that the state had authorized, that was really an unforeseen burden on them. So to ask them to go back into your operating account and try to find 310, it was better to move the 310 out into a reserve fund.
That was the full 14% increase?
Correct.
What were they projecting?
Uh,
2%? I mean, why don't we fund it with 12%?
It was, the state authorized a 14% increase on special education in different categories.
Right, but I think the school was projecting some increase, so if we're trying to make up the difference, I just think that number is the full increase. So if the schools were budgeting, were they projecting 0 increase in that cost? Because they should have been projecting some increase, and so I don't disagree with setting up the stabilization fund, but I think it should be funding the difference between the two, not the full increase necessarily, because I do think we have a free cash. I agree with Peter. I think we have a larger free cash conversation that needs to happen probably, right?
So have that conversation, you know, have that with the finance committee and look at that, you know, just look at that. The 310 was the expected 14% increase, and that was the recommendation. Also, having free cash in that special education reserve, I mean, we could have said 310, we could have said $500,000. We do have to have a special education
I don't disagree
reserve.
with that.
To be
Yeah, yeah.
But, I mean, it is, I agree, having a more in-depth
To be
conversation.
candid, I had met with the superintendent, you know, about a month ago, and I talked about $500,000 in the stabilization fund for special education. And so I think, you know, this sense that we can start with 310, seed it. I do think it's important for this board to just appreciate the absolute significant increase in the number of students that are requiring special education funding. It's changed dramatically since the pandemic, but it was on a really rapid upswing. We've been monitoring this over the last 5 years, and it's just increased at a significant pace. And so I fully expect that, you know, we're going to need to rely on that. Hopefully it's not next year. I can't assure anybody that, you know, they will not be coming back because I think these are all unknowns, and whatever those children need statutorily for their education, we're going to support. I just know that, you know, we're going to have to deal with those issues, and we need to have some careful conversations to negotiate the parameters of those policies, but, you know, I think this gives us a good basis to move forward from. Most important thing for me, and I hope you appreciate this as well, is that we have the school department agreeing to limit the increase in the general fund operating budget to our financial policy and staying on that path over the next few years, I think is going to pay huge dividends in terms of how we manage all the other responsibilities that we have. And that's going to force a lot of really difficult budget conversations, not just with the superintendent, but with other department heads.
I just have one more clarification question. Is the school department committed to filing for the Medicaid reimbursement annually now, or is this just for this fiscal year?
It was my understanding annually, but you have to remember I guess when Sean sat down with Pam, they talked about things annually. My conversation with Cheryl Stiller was they were going to apply for it.
I do think that
Cheryl Stella is there.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to, sit down every fiscal year and have this conversation.
So Cheryl, I'd see your hand raised. So I want to give you a chance to speak and clarify things or.
Thank you, and apologies for inserting myself into your meeting, but I just want to give some clarification and some overall measure of comfort. So to speak to the Medicaid reimbursement, it is our intention to apply for it every year. So while this is a one-year agreement with certain terms, we do anticipate applying for Medicaid every year. So that's absolutely something we intend to do. We actually just had a conversation about today, and that would start in July. So we would sign a contract and start that process in July for next year. So I want to let everyone know about that. And then I think there were some questions about the 310 and our usage of 310. And so, at this point in time, right, we know that we're getting 14% increases on all of our out-of-district tuitions except for one, which is Beverly School for the Deaf, which is giving us a 12% increase. And so by moving that $310,000 out of our operating budget, you might expect us to be drawing on that. Yes, but to Sean's point, we still have to come up with parameters as far as what we're going to keep in circuit breaker, what is appropriate, what is not, and things can change, right? This is a point in time, and then going forward, I just want to remind everybody that our circuit breaker claims will be based off this new increased amount. So we have an issue this year that we're trying to solve, and then next year our circuit breaker claims and our circuit breaker amounts will be indicative of the increased cost. So it helps that burden on the overall budget. And then there is still some legislation out there that they're trying to push that we receive 90% of circuit breaker versus 75%. Again, this is just an FY25 potential, not 24, but, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or later of the board as you move forward.
So I'm sorry, Cheryl, can you just clarify, so did I hear you correctly? I'm going to say it back, but just make sure I heard you correctly, that you, in fiscal year 24, do you believe you will need to, today, do you believe you'll need to draw down on the 310,000 special ed stabilization fund?
That is my expectation, but that's also contingent on when we create the policy, how much circuit breaker balance we're carrying forward each year.
All right, so that's just, thank you, I appreciate that. So, and I appreciate how careful you're being with your responses, because that matters, the details matter. So that just reinforces why we need to, sounds great, why we need to finalize that conversation. And frankly, in fairness, the word circuit breaker is thrown around here, and I'm thinking about my fuses or whatever, circuits in my basement. So, at some point, we also need a tutorial, it's a complex thing. I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but I shouldn't be. Let's have a detailed conversation to understand that in conjunction with this policy so that we, all feel good knowing that in good faith, we believe the 310 to be a true stabilization account as opposed to
Another
a
line.
current year resource, which would not make it a stabilization fund. That's all. And so and I get that something in the future may change, but I'm talking about the moment that we're making the policy decision, I want it to be clear, and then understanding if new information not available to us now comes up, then I get that. Then it is a stabilization need.
Understand. I do think it's important for us to just understand, the last, few years out of a pandemic, there are enormous educational challenges facing the school district. And we've got to just recognize that there may be some additional costs that are going to be a short term, but there may be some long-term issues here as well.
So just to Katie's original point about this item 5, about the meetings and working out this policy, which I appreciate that point more now. So is the idea that this is going to be worked out like over the next few weeks?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Prior to closing the warrant?
It is, yes. Yep.
Correct. I just want to make sure.
Setting expectations.
It's good that we're having this conversation. I personally don't think it's a committee of 22 people sitting in a public meeting sorting this out. I think as though.
I agree.
I don't care how it's done otherwise, to be honest with you. And I don't, but I do want to make sure, I heard you say about getting together for a meeting. At some point, that's great. Everybody has so many meetings to do. I'm more concerned about having the working sessions that.
Understand what a circuit breaker is?
Can come back and tell me about circuit breakers.
Understood.
I just want to be sure that everyone has the same expectations about what this document says. That's all. And that's why I think it's important, because I just think the details matter here, and I don't want anybody to come back and say, well, we thought X, we were promised Y, and I want to make sure that the tone that we're setting now will continue for future years of communication.
I think it's important that I just share that
It can help.
having the school department, present a budget and support a budget, and I mean the school committee and the superintendent, support a budget that increases at 2.6%, forces a lot of difficult conversations on that school department. So they're going to have some difficult conversations, and frankly, I think it really says a lot that they're willing to kind of try to keep the general fund budget in check and try to help balance a lot of these broader fiduciary responsibilities. I hear the board's concern, though, about coming up with the language, and certainly that's a concern of mine, and I have to go over that in detail with the superintendent and the finance teams for both the town and school, and we'll do that over the next few weeks. I'll keep the board informed about that, and we can work as policy leaders to try to ensure we have the right belts and suspenders on these fiduciary responsibilities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl, for being here.
With that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions about the FY24 proposed budget. We have a detailed spreadsheet that has line item details that the board can review. I am happy to kind of leave this as an agenda item up until town meeting, because at the end of the day, this is not the town administrator's budget. This is the town budget. Once I present it to the finance committee and to the select board, it becomes a really working document for the town.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, given the time, I'm not sure how deep people want to dive into this, but I am also want to be mindful of the time in the bigger picture. We're getting down to it.
So the only other...
We have to close the warrant by, what is it?
24th?
The 24th?
Yep.
Of April. School vacations the week of the 17th, so our next scheduled meeting is April 4th.
May the 4th. I mean, April 4th.
And then we haven't scheduled our second April, we will have a second April meeting, likely the week before, maybe doing one during that week of the 17th. The following week is the election, which is the 24th, is that Monday. And then there's 25th is the election. So that's a busy week. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind. I'm certainly not asking people to jump in and start asking real detailed questions, and Amy's not here, but I just want us to keep in mind, like, we are running out
So
of
maybe we
time.
can keep the agenda a little bit clearer next time.
Yeah, I'll
Just
try to,
focused on
yeah.
budget.
Yep. Yep.
All right. The only other updates, we did get the governor's budget. The net variance in state aid was up by $312,743, primarily in educational aid, as we outlined in that agreement. This is going to really offset healthcare expenses. We also saw a reduction in charges for Essex Tech in the budget of $151,521. Again, these are just going to help add a cushion when we get the group insurance commission cost for healthcare. I think once that gets settled, we still may even need some additional funding. So I don't want this to come across as somehow we're in the black.
Oh, no,
I still
I
have
don't
a
think anyone
sense
feels
that
that
we're
way.
going to be pressed to, make some.
But that's the governor's budget, doesn't it? They don't have to go to House Ways and Means?
does.
So House Ways and Means tends to give a little bit more, don't they?
We'll see.
Fingers
We'll see.
crossed.
Yep. I think it's important for us to, be conservative, but, hopeful.
I would like to see Jenny Armini and Brendan Crichton come to our next meeting for 10 minutes, and we can just convey to them how much we would like them to put some more pressure on getting additional funds for us.
Sure. I met with Representative Armini yesterday, and we talked about some fiduciary opportunities for the towns.
Okay.
Does everyone feel similarly? Would you like to invite our state delegation to our next meeting to have a conversation with them?
Sure.
Limited,
It can't hurt.
limited conversation.
Yeah, but
Not a
I was going to say,
In the same
coming
breath
off of
we
the,
asked.
keep the agenda
Keep it
open,
short.
12
but let's
minutes.
invite
12
politicians to keep it short.
They don't even have to talk, they just have to listen.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see about their availability. Okay. Consent agenda, we voted on the entertainment license, so we're just voting on the past meeting minutes from March 1st. Application for hawking and peddling for Sun Run. Cafe Avellino has a one-day liquor license application. And that's it. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Sean, Town Administrator's Report.
Yeah, so,
Read it.
I think you covered a lot of it.
think you
I
can.
did,
Yes,
I
you
did. I just want to recognize Jeff Vaughn. He's working on some policies for body art. Our Board of Health is looking at that. We have a number of events planned. This Friday, we have a St. Patrick's Day event at the Hawthorne. We also have plans under the way for our second annual Earth Day on April 22nd. And Senior Center is gearing up for that social day program on Fridays from 10 to 2. We hope to begin on March 24th. We can accommodate 4 individuals. We've been busy conducting interviews for the Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. I want to thank Diane for moving forward with getting a town hall composting bin, so we are all saving the world one meal at a time. last week I did have an opportunity to tour the Hadley School with a new hotel firm, and this is part of that effort to really think about the reuse of the Hadley. Lastly, I just want to take a moment and recognize passing of Francis Red Delano, served for 43 years in our fire department, was a special police officer, and certainly think we should just take a quick moment of silence and think about his service and the loss of somebody that has spent their life serving the town of Swampscott. That's my report.
Thanks, Sean. Select board time.
Oh, okay, so I'll start.
Dave is ready.
Looks
Well,
like
well,
it.
no, well, no, I wanted to ask Sean a question
Oh,
about.
I'm sorry.
No,
Questions for Sean.
it's fine,
my
it's
fault.
fine, it's fine. I can wrap
Wrap
this
it
up
into
in
select
the
board
select board time, it's all good. Sean, we were supposed to be meeting with Irma, with the Swampscott Housing Authority, to have a sit-down to talk to them about the potential creation of new public housing units or revamped public housing units. So I would like to make that a priority and see if we can get something on the calendar with her and that board. I know it's much
I have
needed.
attempted to schedule a few things. Things have, been a little tricky, but I will follow up and see if we can make that happen.
No, I know. So I think we should bring in Irma. We should probably have a member or two of the Housing Authority, and I'm happy to join you as well. So
Great. I'll circle around with Marzi and see if we can get that scheduled next week.
okay, fantastic. And then just as my, as part of my select board time, I just really want to thank the volunteers. We had a number of them today. We had a number of them here. We had the Tree Canopy Study Committee. We had Open Space. We had a member of the Historical Commission as well. So I know, and I want to thank my fellow volunteers that serve with us serve with me on this board. So thank you. I don't think volunteers in town hear it enough, and this town runs on volunteers. So
It does. Perhaps a volunteer recognition night or program, maybe we should recognize some of those years of service and, make sure that they all feel a sense that, that time is valued.
I have two things. One, I am trying to pull up, but there's a fundraiser at the high school tomorrow night for. Mary Ellen's going to bring it up, so I'll scratch that.
No, I'm not. You better bring it. I just forgot. I didn't.
I think that tickets are sold out, perhaps, but this is terrible because I don't have all the information in front of me and I'm actively trying to look for it. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is apropos to the conversation we were having regarding parking at Phillips Beach. I just want to, it's been discussed at this board before, talk about the boat trailers at Phillips Park and making sure that those are cleared in time for the parking for Eisman's Beach. I know that there are quite a few folks who feel like it takes up a good majority of what would be handicap or more accessible parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So if they need to be stored somewhere, maybe just pushing them further back so that those spots are available for folks who.
So I met with Gino earlier this week about those trailers. Many of them have been there for years, and
Trailers now.
we're going to, employ some efforts to ensure that we remove those and really just remind folks that that's town property, not personal property. And it's been a chronic issue that I've struggled with since my arrival.
Do they not have plates on them?
Updated,
Can you find out whose they are?
stickers and plates, yeah, they're all.
Okay, let's do it.
Yep.
If you have a trailer, come pick it up, please.
You may find it,
Moved.
Recycled.
well,
That's all.
look, we're just not in the business of storing trailers. That's not our,
So, is that it?
Yeah, please.
So for my select board time, I would like to welcome Poppy Hartman into the world. Poppy Hartman is the granddaughter of our health chair, Marianne Hartman, and our finance committee chair, Eric Hartman. So I just, it's pretty exciting. These are people that grew up in Swampscott, went to Swampscott High School, married, now they're chairs of big committees, and now we have Poppy Hartman, so it's exciting.
Future select board member.
Future select board.
That's great. Peter? So, I just wanted to officially announce here, even though it's already been known by most, that I will not be seeking another term on the select board. I'm just going to read a statement that I released last week. I recently began a new chapter in my professional career, which will require an immense amount of my focus and time. After several weeks of internal debate, contemplation, and reflection, I've decided I cannot reasonably balance these responsibilities with those that come with serving on the select board. For the last 3 years, I've been honored and humbled to have been entrusted by my fellow residents to participate in and influence so many important decisions that impact their lives and the direction of our town for years to come. I'd like to thank the entire Swampscott community for your support and contributions, especially my current and former colleagues on the select board. And all the numerous other volunteers, both official and unofficial, who make Swampscott such a phenomenal place to live. I also want to thank the incredible people who work at Town Hall, the Police Department, Fire Department, Department of Public Works, Library, Senior Center, and the public schools. Elected officials and volunteers play an incredibly important role in our town's success, but nothing gets accomplished without the work of these amazing public servants who are as dedicated, committed, and professional as they come. For me, this decision certainly means a step back, but it's not a step away. And I plan to continue participating as a town meeting member, volunteer, and engaged citizen to help our community continue to move in a positive direction. So, thanks.
That's kind of pathetic applause for you. So I wasn't going to say anything, but I do think you are very humble, and there'll be times to say things about your time here, but I will say that you're very humble. The job that you took is Director of Resiliency Planning.
Sustainability and resilience.
Say it again?
Sustainability and resilience.
Sustainability and resiliency for the city of Salem, and that's not a small job. Like, I mean, that is, like, you've worked on so many areas on sustainability for years, and this is such a, for those that know your passion for it, a logical growth place for you, but that is not an insignificant job. Like, that's a really to credit to your dedication and your knowledge and your relationships and your commitment to these things. It's just an awesome job, and to be able to wake up with that responsibility and that opportunity, it's really great. And you're very humble about taking on a new job, but this is a big deal, and I'm glad you didn't get it sooner so that we could have you for at least 3 years in this board.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Neil, you've always been a gentleman and somebody that I've learned to respect and admire. I really appreciate the way that you've treated Swampscott citizens, even during meetings where things would be heated or difficult. You served during the entirety of the pandemic. I don't think there's an elected official that ever would have willingly served during that period. It was next to impossible. Meetings every day, meetings, that never seemed to end, the Zoom fatigue, all this stuff that we have had to go through. But, it's interesting, the things that you have had a chance to support have been among the more difficult things that any city or town could try to accomplish, but we have had a great deal of success. The legacies are going to be hard to see, but over the next 20 years, you're going to look at these things and you're going to see a lot of those difficult decisions and all those tough moments were worth it. And, certainly want to thank your family, thank your children, thank your friends, and folks that really just supported you through it. Elected office is difficult, and you don't do it alone. And every one of those people that you love that sacrificed to have you serve in this role deserves a huge thanks as well.
Thanks, Sean. Still have more than a month left, so.
Yeah, we still have
lots to do.
Yeah, we still have a lot of work to do.
Plenty of time.
You noticed tonight.
But I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Diane. Thanks, Ethan.